You never became anything.
Then let the records decide. These accounts were never disclosed.
That doesn't prove intent. It proves the omission.
Kenneth Lee was 43 years old and worked as the maintenance supervisor at Columbus Central Public High School. Most people saw only a quiet man in worn work boots. Inside the Franklin County courtroom, they believed Scarlett Lee had spent 20 years carrying a husband who never matched her success. Kenneth still drove a 12-year-old pickup, repaired his own appliances, and wore the same scratched wedding band every day. What they didn't know was that he had spent nearly 4 years preparing for this exact hearing. When Scarlett looked across the courtroom and calmly called him worthless, Kenneth didn't flinch. Then Judge Eleanor Whitmore closed the case file, looked directly at him, and said, "Mr. Lee, before I issue my ruling, I need your signature on one final document. If you're watching from somewhere in the world, leave a comment telling us your country and your local time. I always enjoy seeing where these stories reach. And if you enjoy slow-burning stories where patience, truth, and justice matter more than loud arguments, consider subscribing." Tomorrow's story may remind you that the quietest person in the room is often the one everyone misunderstands. The first time Kenneth Lee met Scarlett Morgan, neither of them had enough money to order dessert. It was the autumn of 2003 at a neighborhood diner just off High Street near the Ohio State University. Kenneth had grease under his fingernails from repairing industrial air compressors during the day while attending evening engineering classes whenever overtime allowed. Scarlett was studying business administration, carrying a backpack filled with textbooks and highlighted case studies that looked far more expensive than the coffee she slowly sipped. Kenneth noticed her because she smiled at the waitress before she smiled at anyone else. That mattered to him. He had grown up believing that the smallest habits revealed the largest truths about a person. They talked for nearly 3 hours, not about dreams of becoming wealthy, not about luxury homes, not about status. Instead, they talked about stability. Scarlett wanted to become an executive one day. Kenneth wanted a garage large enough to restore old pickup trucks on weekends. Neither dream sounded impossible. Within 2 years, they were married in a small church outside Columbus. The reception was held inside the fellowship hall, because renting a hotel ballroom wasn't even worth discussing. Kenneth built the wooden centerpieces himself from reclaimed oak. Scarlett's mother baked most of the desserts. Kenneth's older brother borrowed folding chairs from the local volunteer fire department. When the evening ended, they left in Kenneth's aging Ford Ranger, with tin cans tied behind the bumper. Neither of them cared. At least not then. Their first home sat on a quiet street on the western side of Columbus. The house measured barely 1,100 square feet. Its roof leaked. The furnace rattled. Half the windows refused to close completely during winter. Most buyers walked away after one visit. Kenneth saw something different. Every Saturday morning, he climbed onto the roof with shingles balanced across one shoulder. Every Sunday afternoon, he replaced rotten floorboards one plank at a time. Instead of hiring contractors, he watched instructional videos at the public library, borrowed tools from neighbors, and taught himself everything from electrical wiring to drywall finishing. Scarlett often laughed as she handed him another box of screws. "You always think you can fix anything." Kenneth usually answered with the same quiet smile. "Most things can be fixed, if nobody quits halfway." That sentence became something of a rule inside their marriage. Money remained tight. Kenneth received an acceptance letter to continue his engineering education through a university transfer program. It was exactly what he had hoped for. Then, only 2 weeks later, Scarlett received admission into one of Ohio's top graduate business programs. They could not afford both. Kenneth looked at the tuition statement spread across their kitchen table. He never asked Scarlett to choose. Instead, he quietly folded his own acceptance letter and placed it inside a desk drawer. "I'll go later," he said. Scarlett looked relieved. She promised it would only be temporary. Kenneth believed her. He accepted a full-time maintenance position with Columbus Central Public High School because it offered dependable health insurance retirement benefits and predictable hours. The work wasn't glamorous. Most mornings began before sunrise, boilers malfunctioned, water pipes burst, gymnasium lights failed minutes before basketball games, broken lockers, frozen sidewalks, overflowing drains. Thousands of students walked through buildings that stayed warm during winter because Kenneth and a small maintenance crew solved problems before anyone noticed them. Very few people ever thanked them. Kenneth never expected they would. While Scarlett attended graduate classes, Kenneth worked overtime whenever possible. Extra shifts meant another tuition payment, another semester covered, another opportunity she wouldn't have to postpone. Years passed quietly. Scarlett graduated with honors. Then came her first management position. Then another promotion. Then another. Each new title came with longer business trips, larger offices, and increasingly polished colleagues. Kenneth celebrated every achievement. When Scarlett received her first corporate bonus, he surprised her with dinner at Mitchell's Steakhouse downtown. He wore the only suit he owned. The sleeves were slightly short because he had purchased it years earlier. Scarlett looked beautiful in a navy dress. Kenneth watched her laugh with confidence that hadn't existed when they first met. He felt proud, completely proud. Their son Tyler was born 2 years later. Life changed overnight. Scarlett returned to work after maternity leave. Kenneth rearranged his schedule whenever possible. He learned how to braid toy ropes into makeshift swings. He attended parent-teacher conferences. He packed school lunches. He fixed bicycles. He built a treehouse from leftover lumber collected during neighborhood renovations. Tyler rarely asked who earned more money. Children rarely do. He simply knew that whenever something broke, Dad fixed it. Whenever someone forgot homework, Dad drove it across town. Whenever thunderstorms frightened him, Dad stayed awake until morning. Kenneth never considered those moments sacrifices. They simply became ordinary life. As Scarlett's career accelerated, photographs inside the house slowly changed. The family portraits remained, but new framed awards began appearing in the hallway. Leadership Excellence, Regional Growth Award, Top Executive Performance, Corporate Innovation Summit. Kenneth hung every frame perfectly level. Scarlett never had to ask. One evening, Tyler pointed toward the wall. "Where's Dad's award?" Scarlett answered before Kenneth could. "Your dad doesn't really work that kind of job." Kenneth heard the sentence. He continued tightening the frame. Tyler looked confused. Kenneth simply smiled. "It's okay, buddy." The conversation ended there, but Kenneth remembered it, not because it hurt, because it revealed something quietly changing inside the home. As years passed, Scarlett's social circle evolved. Weekend barbecues with neighbors slowly disappeared. Instead, there were networking dinners, executive retreats, charity galas, country club brunches. Kenneth attended whenever Scarlett asked. He listened politely. Most conversations centered around investment portfolios, luxury travel, corporate acquisitions, and vacation homes. When people asked Kenneth what he did for a living, he answered honestly, "I keep a public high school running." Some smiled politely. Others immediately turned back toward Scarlett. Kenneth noticed. He never mentioned it afterward. He remained exactly the same man. The same pickup truck, the same work boots, the same lunch packed every morning in a faded blue cooler, the same wedding band with scratches accumulated over 2 decades of repairing doors, engines, and heating systems. He replaced almost everything around the house. He never replaced that ring. By their 19th anniversary, their financial life looked comfortable from the outside. Scarlett's executive salary exceeded anything either of them had imagined during college. The mortgage was paid. Retirement accounts had grown. Tyler attended one of Columbus's best high schools. Neighbors assumed they were living the American dream. Kenneth wanted very little. He still enjoyed Saturday mornings inside his garage, restoring old tools. He still mowed his own lawn. He still preferred repairing appliances rather than buying new ones. One rainy Thursday evening in early October, Kenneth arrived home carrying a replacement valve for the washing machine. Scarlett wasn't home. She had texted earlier saying another business dinner had run late. Kenneth wasn't bothered. He installed the valve, started a load of laundry, then sat at the kitchen table to organize monthly household bills. It had become another quiet habit. Electricity, water, insurance, property taxes, nothing unusual. Until one envelope refused to make sense. The account number was unfamiliar. The financial institution wasn't their regular bank. The mailing address belonged to an office building in downtown Columbus that Kenneth had never seen connected to their finances. He turned the statement over once. Then again, the balance itself wasn't enormous. That wasn't what caught his attention. It was the account holder's name. It wasn't Kenneth Lee, it wasn't Scarlett Lee. It was something else entirely. Kenneth stared at the paper for several silent seconds. Then he folded it carefully instead of reacting. Somewhere deep inside him, a question quietly took root. And before the night was over, he would make the first decision that would eventually bring him to the courtroom where everyone believed they already knew the truth. Kenneth did not sleep much that night. Not because the unfamiliar bank statement proved anything. It didn't. It was one envelope, one account number, one name he had never seen connected to his family's finances. There were dozens of reasonable explanations. Administrative errors happened. Mail was delivered to the wrong address. Banks merged and changed account titles. Scarlett could easily explain it over breakfast. Kenneth wanted that explanation to exist. He folded the statement, neatly placed it back into its envelope, and slipped it beneath the monthly utility bills before going upstairs. Scarlett returned close to 11:30. Kenneth heard the garage door, then the soft click of expensive heels across the hardwood floor. She looked tired. The dinner ran long," she said while setting her leather briefcase beside the kitchen island. Kenneth nodded. "Anything good?" "Just another client presentation." She kissed his cheek, poured herself a glass of sparkling water, and carried it upstairs. Kenneth watched her leave. He almost mentioned the envelope. Almost? Instead, he reminded himself of something his father had repeated throughout childhood. When you don't have enough information, asking the wrong question only warns the right person. His father had worked 37 years as a police evidence technician. He believed facts should always arrive before accusations. Kenneth quietly returned the envelope to the drawer. The following Saturday morning, he drove Tyler to basketball practice at a recreation center on the north side of Columbus. While Tyler practiced free throws inside the gymnasium, Kenneth sat in the pickup reading maintenance manuals. He wasn't thinking about basketball. He wasn't even reading. His mind kept returning to the unfamiliar account holder's name. On the drive home, Tyler talked excitedly about making varsity next season. Kenneth listened carefully. He always listened. That afternoon, Scarlett announced another 3-day business trip to Chicago. She packed efficiently. 2 tailored suits, 1 garment bag, laptop, presentation folders. Nothing unusual. Kenneth helped load her suitcase into the company SUV waiting outside. "Drive safely," he said. She smiled. "I always do." After she left, the house felt unusually quiet. Tyler spent the evening at a friend's birthday party. Kenneth finished replacing loose fence boards in the backyard before returning inside. He wasn't searching for evidence. He simply wanted to organize household paperwork before tax season. Every cabinet had its own labeled folder: insurance, mortgage, utilities, retirement, medical. He appreciated order. While arranging folders inside the home office, he noticed something else. 3 monthly brokerage statements were missing. Not misplaced. Missing. Kenneth distinctly remembered placing them into the filing cabinet weeks earlier. He checked every drawer. Nothing. He searched twice. Still nothing. His pulse remained steady. Missing papers proved nothing either. He closed the cabinet and made himself coffee instead. Late that evening, he logged into their shared online banking account. Everything appeared normal. Checking, savings, mortgage payments, household expenses. Then he noticed something subtle. Several electronic transfers had been labeled only with abbreviated transaction codes instead of company names. The amounts weren't enormous. $800, $1,200, $975. Spread over several months, individually they attracted little attention. Together they formed a pattern. Kenneth opened a notebook. Not a legal notebook. Just an ordinary spiral notebook purchased at a grocery store for less than $2. He wrote down each transaction. Date, amount, reference number. Nothing else. No conclusions, no accusations. Only facts. The notebook disappeared into his desk drawer. Over the next several weeks, Kenneth changed nothing about his routine. He woke before sunrise, unlocked maintenance buildings, inspected heating systems, repaired classroom projectors, fixed cafeteria plumbing. Teachers greeted him exactly as they always had. "Morning, Ken." "Morning." Students waved while hurrying to first period. He enjoyed those quiet moments. Problems made sense. Broken equipment either worked or it didn't. People were rarely that simple. Meanwhile, Scarlett seemed busier than ever. Business dinners became more frequent. Weekend conferences appeared unexpectedly. Corporate retreats extended into Mondays. Kenneth never complained. He simply adjusted dinner schedules for Tyler. One evening, while replacing ceiling tiles in the high school auditorium, his phone vibrated. It was a fraud alert from their credit card company. "Unusual purchase detected. Please verify." Kenneth opened the notification. The purchase had already been approved. Location, downtown Cincinnati. Luxury jewelry retailer. Amount, $4,800. Kenneth stared at the screen. Scarlett had told him she was attending meetings in Cleveland that day. Perhaps she had traveled afterward. Perhaps the company was entertaining clients. Perhaps there was another explanation. He selected "Verify later" and returned to work. That night he asked only one question. "How was Cleveland?" Scarlett removed her earrings while looking into the bathroom mirror. "Long. Worth the drive." "We flew." Kenneth nodded once. Nothing more. She never mentioned Cincinnati. Neither did he. The next morning he purchased a portable document scanner online. Not because he expected a divorce, because paper disappeared. Digital copies didn't. Every household document he handled afterward received the same treatment. Bank statements, insurance renewals, tax filings, property assessments. Everything was scanned, dated, and stored inside encrypted folders on an external hard drive locked inside his garage toolbox. He wasn't hiding information. He was preserving it. Weeks became months. The notebook slowly filled. Never with opinions, only dates, transaction numbers, receipts, travel schedules, small inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that independently proved deception. But together they formed something Kenneth couldn't ignore. He finally accepted he needed advice. Not revenge. Advice. He searched for experienced family attorneys in Columbus, but refused to choose based on advertising. Instead, he asked someone he trusted. His older brother Michael had spent 22 years with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. When Kenneth described the situation without exaggeration, Michael remained silent for nearly a minute. Finally, he said one name. "William Carter. Family lawyer. The best I've ever seen. What makes him different?" "He never starts fights." Kenneth wrote the name down. 3 days later, he walked into a brick office building near the Franklin County Courthouse. No marble floors, no expensive artwork, no receptionist dressed like a luxury hotel concierge. The office looked practical. Exactly what Kenneth expected. William Carter entered carrying a legal pad instead of a laptop. He was nearly 60, gray hair, reading glasses, a navy suit that had clearly been tailored years earlier, but carefully maintained. He shook Kenneth's hand firmly. "What can I do for you?" Kenneth spent 45 minutes explaining everything, not dramatically, chronologically. He showed the notebook, the copied statements, the unusual transfers, the missing records, the inconsistent travel information. When he finished, William remained silent. He didn't immediately offer reassurance. Instead, he asked a series of precise questions. Have you confronted your wife? No. Have you accused her of anything? No. Have you accessed accounts that aren't legally yours? No. Good. William leaned back. Right now you have questions. Kenneth nodded. You do not have a case. The sentence landed harder than Kenneth expected. William continued before disappointment could settle. But questions become evidence when they're documented properly. He opened a clean folder. From today forward, you change only one thing. Kenneth waited. You stop relying on memory. William slid a printed checklist across the desk. Document everything. Dates, conversations, financial records, mail, receipts, travel, photographs, public records. Never alter anything. Never hide anything. Never provoke an argument hoping someone confesses. Kenneth listened without interruption. And one more thing, William added. If your wife has done nothing wrong, these records will protect both of you. Kenneth appreciated that answer. It wasn't built on suspicion. It was built on fairness. He retained William that afternoon. Leaving the office, Kenneth didn't feel triumphant. He felt heavier. The possibility that his marriage required legal documentation instead of trust hurt more than he expected. That evening, he stopped at an office supply store before driving home. He bought a fire-resistant document box, a package of numbered folders, archival sleeves, permanent labels. Nothing expensive. Inside his garage workshop, after Tyler had gone to bed and Scarlett was away on another overnight trip, Kenneth carefully organized the first official evidence file exactly as William instructed. Folder 1, Financial Statements, Verified Originals. He placed the unfamiliar bank statement inside a protective sleeve. Then he added scanned copies dates and handwritten notes identifying only where each document had been obtained. No conclusions, no accusations, only verifiable facts. Kenneth closed the lid of the fireproof box and locked it. For the first time since finding the mysterious envelope, he understood something important. The truth would not reveal itself all at once. It would arrive one document at a time. William Carter never called Kenneth unless there was something worth saying. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Kenneth's phone vibrated just after lunch while he was replacing a leaking valve beneath the football stadium bleachers. Can you stop by after work? Kenneth wiped his hands with an old shop towel. Something wrong? No. William paused. But there are a few things you should understand before this goes any further. Kenneth arrived at the attorney's office shortly after 6. The same brick building, the same practical furniture, the same coffee that somehow always tasted older than it probably was. William spread several folders across his conference table. I've reviewed everything you've collected. Kenneth waited. You've done something very unusual. I wrote things down. You wrote down facts. William tapped the notebook Kenneth had been keeping. Most people document feelings, anger, suspicion, arguments. He pushed the notebook back across the table. You documented dates. Kenneth nodded once. I wasn't sure what mattered. Everything matters. William leaned forward. The legal system doesn't reward whoever cries the loudest. He pointed toward the notebook. It rewards consistency. Kenneth listened carefully. I want you to make one promise. What is it? No matter what happens, from this point forward, you don't change your behavior. Kenneth frowned slightly. What do you mean? You don't suddenly become suspicious. You don't demand passwords. You don't secretly install recording devices. You don't follow your wife. You don't search through her private belongings. William folded his hands. If you start acting differently now, everything you've built becomes harder to explain. Kenneth understood immediately. His greatest advantage wasn't hidden evidence. It was that he had continued living honestly. That evening he drove home thinking less about Scarlett and more about discipline. Patience wasn't passive. It required work every single day. The next several months settled into a strange rhythm. Kenneth repaired broken classroom heaters before sunrise. He attended Tyler's baseball games. He mowed the lawn every Saturday morning. He cooked dinner whenever Scarlett traveled. Nothing about the outside of his life appeared different. Inside, however, one new habit quietly took shape. Every evening after dinner, Kenneth spent 15 minutes updating his notebook. Nothing dramatic. Tuesday, Scarlett left for Cincinnati at 6:10 a.m., returned Thursday at 8:45 p.m. Friday. Mortgage payment cleared. Sunday, insurance renewal received. Wednesday, corporate conference announced. Each entry occupied only a few lines. No opinions, no emotional language, only observations. Sometimes there were several days without a single note. William had told him that was perfectly acceptable. If nothing happened, he had said, don't invent something. Kenneth appreciated that advice. Truth didn't need decoration. Tyler noticed none of it. His attention remained focused on school baseball practice and earning his driver's permit. Kenneth spent weekends teaching him practical skills instead. Changing engine oil, replacing brake pads, building shelves inside the garage. You know, Tyler laughed one afternoon while tightening a wrench. My friends think it's weird that we actually fix things. Kenneth smiled. What do they do? They just buy new ones. Kenneth wiped grease from an old socket wrench. Sometimes that's the right answer. And sometimes people throw away things that could have lasted another 20 years. Tyler grinned. You mean cars? Kenneth looked briefly toward the house. Not always. The conversation ended there. He hoped Tyler hadn't understood. A week later, Scarlett hosted a corporate dinner at their home. 8 executives arrived wearing tailored suits and expensive watches. Kenneth grilled steaks in the backyard while conversations drifted across the patio. Market expansion, quarterly growth, executive bonuses, private equity, stock options. He rarely entered the discussion. He preferred making sure everyone's drinks stayed filled. Late in the evening, one executive asked casually, "So, Kenneth, what do you do?" Kenneth answered exactly as always. I supervise maintenance for Columbus Central Public High School. The man nodded politely. Oh, nothing more. The conversation immediately shifted back toward corporate acquisitions. Kenneth noticed Scarlett smiling politely, but she never redirected the discussion back toward him. It wasn't the first time. After the guests left, Kenneth carried empty glasses into the kitchen. Scarlett looked exhausted. They seemed to like dinner. They loved it. She loosened her earrings while placing serving dishes into the sink. I wish you'd talk more during those events. Kenneth looked up. I thought everyone else had enough to say. She hesitated. It's just... She stopped. What? Never mind. No. Kenneth smiled gently. What were you going to say? Scarlett dried one wine glass carefully. Sometimes people don't understand you. Kenneth nodded. They're not required to. She didn't answer. Neither did he. The silence between them felt longer than usual. Days later, another unusual envelope arrived. This one wasn't addressed incorrectly. It belonged to Scarlett. Kenneth recognized the return address immediately. The same downtown office building listed on the mysterious financial statement months earlier. He set the unopened envelope on the kitchen counter, where Scarlett would easily see it. That evening she picked it up without saying anything. Her expression changed for only a fraction of a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Kenneth did. She slipped it into her briefcase before going upstairs. Nothing was explained. Nothing was asked. Later that night, Kenneth opened his notebook. One sentence. Large envelope from Easton Financial Holdings received at residence. Collected by Scarlett. No further discussion. He closed the notebook. By early spring, William requested another meeting. This time, Rebecca Collins joined them. She arrived carrying 3 banker boxes filled with financial records. Rebecca looked nothing like the dramatic accountants portrayed in television dramas. No flashy presentation, no theatrical confidence, only organized files. She shook Kenneth's hand. "I've started reviewing what William sent." Kenneth nodded. "Have you found anything?" Rebecca answered carefully. "I've found patterns." William smiled faintly. Rebecca doesn't use words like suspicious unless she can prove them. Rebecca opened one folder. "I've compared reported household income with documented expenditures over the last several years." Kenneth listened. "There are differences." "Large?" "Not yet." Rebecca adjusted her glasses. "But consistent." She showed him several spreadsheets. Colored rows, dates, transfers, corporate reimbursements, mortgage payments, investment deposits. "I don't know what these transactions mean." Kenneth appreciated her honesty. "But I know they deserve further examination." William looked toward Kenneth. "This is why we waited." Kenneth understood. Had he confronted Scarlett months earlier, these records might never have existed. Facts required time. People often exposed themselves simply by continuing ordinary routines. Leaving the office, Kenneth drove directly to Tyler's school to watch his son's baseball game. The afternoon sun settled behind the outfield fence. Parents cheered loudly after every hit. Kenneth stood quietly near third base. Tyler spotted him immediately. Between innings, he waved. Kenneth waved back. Nothing in the world mattered more than that simple moment. For almost 2 hours, he forgot entirely about bank statements, lawyers, financial records, corporate accounts. Life felt normal again. Driving home together, Tyler talked non-stop about an upcoming tournament. Kenneth listened carefully. He realized something important. Every decision he made from that point forward would eventually affect Tyler more than anyone else. That thought strengthened his resolve. He refused to let anger make choices that evidence should make instead. Summer arrived. Scarlett traveled even more frequently. Kenneth continued documenting only what could be verified, nothing else. One evening, William called unexpectedly. His voice sounded unusually serious. "Kenneth?" "Yes." "I need you to prepare yourself." "For what?" "I believe the marriage is approaching its end." Kenneth remained silent. "We're still missing one important piece," William continued. "But if my instincts are right," he paused, "you shouldn't be surprised if divorce papers arrive before the end of the month." Kenneth stared through the windshield of his parked pickup truck. Children laughed somewhere across the neighborhood. A lawnmower hummed in the distance. Everything around him looked painfully ordinary. Finally, he answered, "If that's what happens," William waited. "I'll be ready." Kenneth ended the call and sat alone for several minutes. Then he drove home. The mailbox stood at the end of the driveway exactly where it always had. Inside were grocery advertisements, a utility bill, one certified envelope requiring his signature. He recognized the law firm's return address before he even opened it. Kenneth stood beside the mailbox for several seconds before opening the certified envelope. The summer air felt unusually still. Children rode bicycles farther down the street. Someone nearby was grilling hamburgers. Nothing about the neighborhood suggested that a 20-year marriage had just been reduced to a stack of legal papers. He carefully signed the postal receipt, thanked the carrier, and carried the envelope inside without rushing. The return address belonged to one of Columbus's largest family law firms. He already knew what was inside. Even so, seeing the words "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage" in black print carried a weight that no amount of preparation could soften. Kenneth sat alone at the kitchen table. He read every page once, then he read them again. No anger, no disbelief, only careful attention. The filing requested temporary possession of the marital residence, primary financial control, exclusive access to several investment accounts, temporary spousal limitations, specific parenting arrangements for Tyler. Several paragraphs described Kenneth as someone who had contributed minimally to the family's financial growth. He paused there, not because the words offended him, because they ignored 20 years of reality with remarkable confidence. He closed the folder and reached for his phone. William Carter answered on the second ring. It arrived. Yes. Have you signed anything? No. Good. When can you come in? I'm leaving now. William's office already had copies of the filing by the time Kenneth arrived. The attorney highlighted several paragraphs with a yellow marker. This isn't unusual. Kenneth remained quiet. Most divorce petitions tell one side of the story. William closed the file. Our job isn't to argue with every sentence. Our job is to prove what actually happened. Kenneth nodded. What happens first? We respond. What about the house? We'll deal with temporary orders. William looked directly at him. I know this feels personal. It is. It is, William agreed. But family court runs on procedure. If we stay disciplined, procedure becomes your friend. For the next 2 hours, they reviewed every document Kenneth had collected over the past several months. Nothing dramatic. Bank statements, mortgage records, property tax receipts, insurance renewals, household maintenance expenses, vehicle registrations, utility payments. William smiled faintly. I've represented people who earned 10 times your income. Kenneth looked up. They rarely organized records this well. Kenneth shrugged. I fix broken systems. William laughed quietly. So do I. 3 days later, the temporary hearing took place. The courtroom felt smaller than Kenneth expected. Judge Eleanor Whitmore presided from the bench with the same calm expression that would later become familiar to everyone involved in the case. Scarlett sat confidently beside 2 attorneys. Her charcoal suit looked perfectly tailored. Kenneth noticed she never looked in his direction. William spoke only when necessary. Scarlett's attorney argued that she had been the family's primary financial provider for years. He emphasized her executive position, her salary, her professional responsibilities. Kenneth listened without interruption. William responded with only a handful of points: stable employment, continuous parenting responsibilities, shared marital contributions, preservation of marital assets. Judge Whitmore took careful notes. She rarely interrupted either attorney. By the end of the hearing, she issued temporary orders. Scarlett would remain in the marital home. Kenneth would relocate temporarily. Certain financial accounts would remain frozen until discovery concluded. Tyler's schedule would be shared. The decision wasn't unexpected. William had prepared Kenneth for exactly this possibility. Still packing 20 years into cardboard boxes proved harder than hearing the judge's ruling. Kenneth chose a modest 1-bedroom apartment less than 15 minutes from Tyler's school. The building overlooked a small public park. The carpet had faded years earlier. The kitchen cabinets showed scratches around every handle. The apartment reminded him of the first home he and Scarlett had once shared. He unpacked only what he needed: work clothes, a coffee maker, his toolbox, family photographs, the fireproof document box. Nothing else. On his first morning there, Kenneth woke automatically at 5:30. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then the unfamiliar ceiling reminded him. He dressed quietly and drove to work before sunrise. Routine helped. The boiler inside the science building needed repair. 2 classroom doors required adjustment. A cafeteria refrigerator had stopped cooling overnight. Broken equipment remained refreshingly honest. Unlike people, machines never pretended. Meanwhile, word of the separation spread faster than Kenneth expected. Not through him, through social circles, neighbors, parents from Tyler's school, corporate acquaintances, church members. People began offering carefully worded sympathy. Some avoided the subject entirely. Others assumed Scarlett had finally become tired of supporting an unmotivated husband. Kenneth corrected no one. He simply thanked them for their concern. One Friday afternoon, his longtime co-worker Joe Ramirez joined him while replacing damaged ceiling tiles. Joe hesitated before speaking. "I heard about you and Scarlett." Kenneth kept working. "Yeah. You okay?" "I'm managing." Joe nodded. After another minute, he said quietly, "I've known you 18 years. Kenneth looked over. "You've never been lazy." It wasn't a dramatic statement. It wasn't meant to be. For Kenneth, it mattered more than Joe probably realized. At least someone judged him by observation instead of assumption. Tyler adjusted to the new schedule better than Kenneth feared. Weekdays alternated. Weekends were shared. Kenneth refused to use his son as a messenger between parents. Whenever Tyler asked questions about the divorce, Kenneth answered only what he honestly knew. One Saturday, they assembled a workbench inside the apartment's small storage room. Tyler tightened the final bolt. "This place doesn't feel like home yet." Kenneth looked around. "No." "Will it?" Kenneth smiled slightly. "Home isn't usually the first thing you unpack." Tyler considered that. "What is routine?" They spent the afternoon organizing tools. For a few hours, life almost felt normal again. The financial restrictions, however, became increasingly noticeable. Temporary court orders required detailed accounting of expenses. Major purchases required documentation. Access to several joint accounts remained restricted. Kenneth adjusted without complaint. He prepared meals at home, drove the same pickup, worked overtime whenever school maintenance projects became available. Every receipt went into labeled envelopes: gasoline, groceries, apartment rent, medical expenses, school supplies. William had instructed him months earlier. "Never assume you'll remember later." Kenneth followed that advice without exception. Every Sunday evening, he scanned new receipts into secure digital folders before placing the originals into archival sleeves. He never skipped a week. He also preserved every email exchanged with Scarlett, every text message, every calendar update involving Tyler, every court notice, every utility statement. His apartment slowly filled with orderly file boxes rather than expensive furniture. Several weeks into discovery, William invited Kenneth back to the office. Rebecca Collins already sat at the conference table surrounded by spreadsheets. She looked unusually focused. "I've gone through another 6 months of financial records." Kenneth waited. Rebecca slid one chart across the table. Colored lines connected dozens of transactions between different accounts. At first, these looked random. She pointed toward several dates. "They aren't." William leaned back silently. Rebecca continued. "Money repeatedly moved through intermediary accounts before reaching destinations that were never disclosed in preliminary financial disclosures." Kenneth studied the chart. "I don't understand all of it." "You don't need to." Rebecca smiled politely. "My job is understanding numbers." She tapped one sequence highlighted in blue. "This pattern repeats every quarter." "Always." "Almost?" William finally spoke. "Can you prove intent?" Rebecca answered immediately. "Not yet." Kenneth noticed she used the same careful language William always used. Facts first, conclusions later. Rebecca opened another folder. "There is one problem." Kenneth looked up. "We're still missing documentation identifying the ownership structure behind one particular account." "The one from the first statement," Rebecca nodded. "If we identify who legally controls it," she paused, "the entire financial timeline changes." Silence settled across the conference room. Kenneth remembered the unfamiliar envelope he had discovered months earlier. One simple piece of mail. At the time, it had seemed insignificant. Now Rebecca treated it like the missing corner of a complicated puzzle. William closed the folders carefully. "We're close." "How close?" Kenneth asked. William looked toward the office window before answering. "Close enough that the other side may become nervous." Kenneth understood exactly what that meant. People who believed their story was secure rarely hurried. People protecting something often did. As he left the office, his phone vibrated. A new email notification appeared. The sender was Scarlett. The subject line contained only 5 words. Future communication through counsel. Kenneth opened the message. It was brief, professional, emotionally empty. Effective immediately, all communication regarding finances, property, or legal matters would occur exclusively through attorneys. Only messages concerning Tyler would be sent directly. Kenneth read it once, then archived it without replying. He drove home through downtown Columbus as evening settled across the city. The apartment parking lot looked almost empty. He carried groceries upstairs, organized new receipts into their proper folder, and updated his notebook. At the bottom of the page, he wrote one final sentence before closing it. "The distance between truth and proof is becoming smaller." He had no way of knowing that within days, Rebecca Collins would discover a financial pattern that none of them had expected. Rebecca Collins called at 7:12 on a Tuesday morning. Kenneth had just finished replacing a damaged circulation pump in the school's boiler room when his phone vibrated inside his work jacket. He stepped into the hallway before answering. "Good morning." Rebecca rarely sounded excited. That morning was no different. "Can you meet us this evening?" Kenneth recognized the difference immediately. She wasn't asking because she needed another document. She had found something. "I'll be there." William Carter's conference room looked exactly the same as it always had. Legal pads, neatly stacked files, fresh coffee, nothing dramatic. Rebecca had covered one entire wall with enlarged financial charts connected by thin blue strings and colored markers. To most people, they looked confusing. To Rebecca, they told a story. She pointed toward the earliest transaction Kenneth had documented nearly a year earlier. "Remember this statement?" Kenneth nodded. "The unfamiliar account." Rebecca smiled. It wasn't actually the account that mattered. It was the company. She handed Kenneth a corporate registration record obtained through public filings. Easton Financial Holdings, LLC, registered in Ohio, small consulting company, 3 listed managers. None of the names belonged to Scarlett. Kenneth looked up. "So it's unrelated." Rebecca shook her head. "Keep reading." Buried near the bottom of the filing appeared another entry, authorized representative, Daniel Mercer. Kenneth searched his memory. The name sounded familiar. William leaned forward. "Take your time." Then Kenneth remembered. Daniel Mercer, Senior Vice President, Scarlett's direct supervisor, the executive who had attended several dinners at their home. The man who had complimented Kenneth's grilled steaks while barely asking a single question about his life. "I know him." Rebecca nodded. "We thought you might." She placed another folder on the table. "This gets more interesting." Over the next 30 minutes, Rebecca explained her findings carefully. Money originating from several corporate reimbursement accounts had repeatedly moved through consulting agreements involving Easton Financial Holdings. Some payments appeared legitimate, others raised questions. Several deposits eventually flowed into investment accounts that had never appeared in Scarlett's initial financial disclosures. Kenneth listened without interrupting. "So she hid money," Rebecca answered immediately. "I didn't say that." William smiled faintly. "Rebecca never says something she can't prove." Rebecca continued. "I can prove money moved. I can prove certain accounts were omitted. I cannot yet prove who controlled every dollar." Kenneth appreciated the distinction. Truth required precision, not assumptions. William folded his hands. "Discovery gives us new tools." He slid a legal motion across the table. "We are requesting complete financial disclosures. Business records, corporate reimbursements, investment accounts, electronic communications related to disputed assets." Kenneth read quietly. "Will they have to provide everything?" "If the court orders it." "And if they don't?" William's expression remained calm. "Judges don't enjoy incomplete disclosures." Kenneth left the office carrying no new evidence, only patience. The following weeks became consumed by discovery. Boxes of documents moved between attorneys. Digital files arrived on encrypted drives. Financial disclosures expanded from dozens of pages to hundreds. Rebecca practically lived inside spreadsheets. Kenneth continued repairing classrooms. The contrast amused him. One day he spent 6 hours replacing leaking plumbing beneath the cafeteria. That evening he reviewed legal documents discussing 6-figure investments. Both required attention to detail. Neither rewarded rushing. Tyler turned 17 during that time. Kenneth insisted on keeping one family tradition alive. Every birthday meant dinner at the same neighborhood Italian restaurant they had visited since Tyler was 5 years old. Scarlett agreed to attend. The dinner remained polite, almost painfully polite. Tyler talked about college applications, baseball, friends. Scarlett described an upcoming conference in New York. Kenneth mostly listened. When dessert arrived, Tyler excused himself to answer a phone call outside. For the first time all evening, Kenneth and Scarlett sat alone. She stirred her coffee without looking up. "You've changed." Kenneth considered the statement. "Have I?" "You're quieter." He smiled gently. "I've always been quiet." She finally met his eyes. "No. You used to explain yourself." Kenneth looked toward the restaurant window. "I don't think explanations help much anymore." Scarlett didn't answer. Neither mentioned the divorce. Neither mentioned court. When Tyler returned, the conversation shifted immediately to baseball again. Driving home afterward, Kenneth realized something. He no longer recognized the woman sitting across from him. Not because she had become cruel. Because somewhere along the way they had stopped speaking the same language. Scarlett measured success through expansion. Kenneth measured it through stability. Neither philosophy had seemed incompatible 20 years earlier. Now they appeared impossible to reconcile. A month later, William called with another update. "The court granted most of our discovery requests." Kenneth nodded. "What happens now?" "They respond." "And if the records match what they've already disclosed?" William smiled. "Then we continue." "And if they don't?" William paused. "Then someone has difficult questions to answer." Rebecca worked almost non-stop for the next 3 weeks. She reconstructed transaction histories, one transfer at a time. One Friday evening, she invited Kenneth and William into her office. Empty coffee cups covered one side of her desk. Colored sticky notes filled an entire bulletin board. She looked exhausted, but satisfied. "I found it." William didn't ask what. He simply sat down. Rebecca projected a flowchart onto the wall. Multiple corporate reimbursements, consulting payments, investment transfers, property acquisitions, everything eventually connected to 2 previously undisclosed brokerage accounts. Both accounts listed beneficiaries. Neither beneficiary was Kenneth. One beneficiary was Scarlett. The second shocked everyone. The account named Easton Financial Holdings as co-owner. Silence filled the room. Rebecca spoke softly. "This changes everything." Kenneth stared at the screen. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised anymore. He simply wanted to understand. "What does co-owner mean?" Rebecca answered carefully. "It means assets connected to the marriage may have been transferred into accounts involving outside financial interests." William looked toward Kenneth. "If proven." Rebecca nodded immediately. "If proven." William stood and walked slowly towards the projection. The judge asked both parties to disclose every marital asset. Rebecca changed slides. "The preliminary disclosures omitted these accounts." William looked back. That matters. Kenneth finally asked the question occupying his mind. Does it explain why she filed for divorce? Neither attorney answered immediately. Finally, William said, It explains why timing may have mattered. Kenneth drove home long after dark. His apartment remained quiet. He placed fresh receipts into labeled folders before making coffee. Old habits grounded him. He opened the fireproof box. Inside lay the very first bank statement, the envelope that had begun everything. He remembered nearly throwing it away. Just another piece of mail. Instead, he had filed it. That single decision now connected to hundreds of financial records. Kenneth closed the box. His phone buzzed. It was Tyler. Dad? Yeah? Are you busy? Never too busy. Tyler hesitated. Mom keeps asking if I'm okay. Kenneth remained silent. I told her I was. Are you... Another pause. I don't know. Kenneth understood. At 17, Tyler stood between two parents he loved. No court order could simplify that. Listen to me. I'm listening. You don't have to choose sides. I know. No. Kenneth spoke more firmly. I mean it. This isn't your fight. Tyler's voice softened. Okay. And if you ever feel stuck, I'll call. You already did. After hanging up, Kenneth sat alone for a long time. Winning the legal case suddenly seemed much less important than protecting Tyler from becoming another casualty of it. The following Monday, both legal teams met for another discovery conference. Scarlett arrived with remarkable confidence. Daniel Mercer wasn't present. Neither was anyone connected to Easton Financial Holdings. Kenneth noticed William saying very little. Rebecca carried only one thin folder instead of her usual stack of binders. Scarlett's lead attorney spoke first. We believe discovery is substantially complete. William smiled politely. I'm afraid it isn't. The room became noticeably quieter. William slid one document across the conference table, then another, then a third. Each page contained verified financial records Rebecca had reconstructed independently. Scarlett's attorney read the first page, then the second. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. He looked toward Scarlett. For the first time since the divorce proceedings had begun, Kenneth watched confidence disappear from the opposing side's table. No voices were raised. No accusations were made. William simply asked one calm question. Would your client like an opportunity to supplement her financial disclosures before we submit these exhibits to the court? Scarlett looked at the documents without speaking. Her attorney requested a recess. As they left the conference room, William quietly gathered his papers. Kenneth looked at him. Was that enough? William placed the folders into his briefcase. No. What was it? William closed the briefcase gently. It was the first time they realized we already knew where to look. The first settlement proposal arrived exactly 9 days after the discovery conference. William Carter handed the envelope to Kenneth without comment. Read it. Kenneth opened the document slowly. The proposal was generous, at least on the surface. Scarlett would keep the marital home. She would retain most investment accounts already disclosed. Kenneth would receive a cash settlement, his retirement account shared parenting rights with Tyler, and ownership of his pickup truck and personal tools. To anyone reading only those pages, it looked reasonable. William watched him finish. What do you think? Kenneth closed the folder. I think they're in a hurry. William smiled. So do I. Rebecca Collins slid another document across the table. The proposed settlement excludes every account we questioned. Kenneth wasn't surprised. They're pretending those accounts don't exist. Exactly. William folded his hands. They're offering certainty before uncertainty becomes evidence. Kenneth looked again at the proposal. Months earlier, he might have accepted it simply to end the pain, not anymore. He had learned something important. Speed usually benefited the person hiding information, Patience benefited the person documenting it. What do we do? William answered immediately. We decline. No dramatic speech, no angry letter. Just one professionally written response requesting complete financial disclosure before settlement discussions could continue. The answer occupied less than 2 pages. Truth didn't require long arguments. 3 days later, Scarlett called. It was the first direct phone conversation they had shared in months. Kenneth answered after the second ring. Hello? Did William tell you about the offer? He did. You should accept it. Kenneth remained silent. It gives both of us a chance to move forward. He listened carefully. Her voice sounded controlled, professional, almost identical to the tone she used during corporate presentations. I'd rather finish discovery first. A pause. Why? Because that's the process. Another silence followed. You've changed, Kenneth. I've become more careful. You've become suspicious. Kenneth looked through the apartment window toward the small park outside. Children chased one another across the grass. I haven't accused you of anything. No. But your lawyer has. My lawyer is asking for records. Scarlett sighed. This is becoming expensive. Kenneth answered quietly. The truth usually costs less than hiding it. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Scarlett ended the conversation with a simple goodbye. Kenneth returned the phone to the kitchen counter. He immediately documented the call. Date, time, duration, general topics. No emotional descriptions. Just facts. The following week, Tyler moved into his senior year of high school. Kenneth helped him shop for school supplies. Nothing expensive. Notebooks, pens, calculator batteries, a new backpack because the old zipper had finally failed. While waiting in line to pay, Tyler asked a question that caught Kenneth off guard. Did you ever want a different job? Kenneth smiled. Sometimes. What stopped you? Kenneth considered the answer carefully. I thought stability mattered more. For us. For all 3 of us. Tyler looked thoughtful. Do you regret it? Kenneth didn't answer immediately. He remembered declining the university engineering program, working overtime, repairing roofs, missing sleep, watching Scarlett build the career she had dreamed about. No? You really don't, Kenneth shook his head. I regret some outcomes. But I don't regret taking care of my family. Tyler nodded slowly. I think I'd make the same choice. Kenneth hoped his son never faced the same decision. Back at school, Kenneth's own routine continued unchanged. The maintenance department prepared buildings for winter. Heating systems required inspection. Emergency generators needed testing. Hundreds of fluorescent lights had to be replaced before daylight savings ended. Principal Linda Brooks walked through the mechanical room one afternoon carrying a clipboard. You've been here almost 20 years. 19, she smiled. Feels longer. Kenneth laughed quietly. It probably does. She looked around the spotless equipment room. You know. What? I've interviewed dozens of maintenance supervisors. Kenneth kept tightening a valve. No one leaves this place running better than you. Compliments embarrassed him. Thanks. I mean it. She hesitated. If you ever decide to leave replacing, you would take 3 people. Kenneth smiled politely. Very few people outside the school understood what his work actually involved. Linda Brooks did. That mattered. Late October brought another major development. Rebecca requested every reimbursement report Scarlett had submitted during the previous 5 years. Most arrived without issue. One category immediately caught her attention: executive travel expenses, hotel stays, client entertainment, conference registrations, airfare. Everything appeared professionally organized. Too professionally organized. Rebecca frowned while reviewing the files. William noticed. What? She pointed toward several reimbursement forms. The dates? Kenneth leaned closer. What about them? They overlap. William adjusted his glasses. Explain. Rebecca highlighted 3 separate conferences: Chicago, Denver, Atlanta. Each occurred on different weekends. Yet reimbursement requests showed identical hotel invoices from the same corporate travel agency. She enlarged one invoice, then another, then another. The formatting is identical. That's unusual, Rebecca shook her head. The invoice numbers? They're sequential. Kenneth didn't understand. William did. They were generated together. Rebecca nodded. Not months apart. Silence filled the office. Rebecca continued comparing records. 1 hour later, she found another inconsistency. Several flights listed in reimbursement reports didn't match airline boarding records obtained through Discovery. Can that happen accidentally? Kenneth asked. Rebecca answered with characteristic precision. Once. Maybe. Repeatedly. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. William stood and walked toward the window. I think we're approaching the real issue. Kenneth looked up. What issue? William turned. I no longer believe this case is only about divorce. The room became completely still. Rebecca carefully organized the papers before speaking. If financial disclosures were inaccurate, if reimbursement records were altered, if marital assets were transferred, she looked toward William. Other legal questions may eventually arise. Kenneth felt no satisfaction hearing that, only sadness. Every new discovery seemed to move further away from the woman he thought he had married. Several days later, William received another call from opposing counsel. This time the tone differed. Settlement discussions became noticeably more flexible. New financial concessions appeared. Additional cash, different property division, modified retirement allocations. William rejected the proposal without consulting Kenneth. Driving home afterward, Kenneth asked why. You didn't even ask me. William smiled. They're negotiating against evidence they haven't seen. What evidence? William opened his briefcase. Rebecca had reconstructed nearly every financial movement connected to the undisclosed accounts. Almost. One final gap remained. The actual ownership documents establishing authority over Easton Financial Holdings. If we obtain those, William tapped the folder, everything connects. Can we? Rebecca answered. We filed the subpoena yesterday. The waiting began again. 2 weeks, then 3. Kenneth focused on ordinary life. Tyler earned acceptance into Ohio State University. They celebrated with pizza at the apartment. No expensive restaurant, no elaborate speeches. Just father and son sharing good news. You know what I'm most excited about? Tyler asked. What? I won't have to leave Columbus. Kenneth smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Tyler looked around the apartment. Do you think everything will be finished by then? Kenneth understood what he meant. The divorce, the court hearings, the uncertainty. I hope so. Hope. Not certainty. He had stopped making promises he couldn't guarantee. The next Monday morning, William's office received the subpoena response. Rebecca called immediately. Her voice remained calm, as always. We have the ownership records. Kenneth arrived within the hour. Rebecca placed one thin folder on the conference table. No dramatic build-up, William joked quietly. Rebecca opened the file. Inside were official corporate registration amendments, authorized managers, ownership percentages, financial authority signatures. One signature belonged to Daniel Mercer, the second belonged to Scarlett Lee. Kenneth stared silently. No accusations, no speculation, only notarized documents. Rebecca turned one more page. This amendment became effective, She pointed to the date. 11 days before Scarlett filed for divorce. William slowly removed his glasses. For the first time since Kenneth had hired him, the experienced attorney appeared genuinely surprised. He looked at Kenneth, then back at the documents. Finally, he spoke. "I think we've just discovered why they wanted this case settled so quickly." The subpoena response changed the rhythm of the case. Until then, William Carter had spent months asking questions. Now he began preparing answers. Kenneth noticed the difference immediately. Legal meetings became shorter. Rebecca Collins stopped requesting additional financial records and started arranging existing evidence into chronological binders. Every document received colored tabs. Every transaction received a corresponding exhibit number. Every bank statement pointed toward another verified record. Nothing stood alone anymore. It was becoming a chain. William called Kenneth into the conference room one Friday afternoon. 3 thick binders rested on the polished wooden table. Red, blue, gray. William tapped each one. Red is financial records. Blue is discovery responses. Gray is witness exhibits. Kenneth looked at the stacks. "It doesn't seem like much." Rebecca smiled. "Only because you're looking at paper." She opened the red binder. "What matters isn't the volume. It's the timeline." She flipped through page after page. There are no missing months. No missing transfers. No unexplained gaps. She looked at Kenneth. When evidence tells one continuous story, judges notice. Kenneth nodded. His father had once said something similar after spending decades cataloging criminal evidence. Broken chains break cases. Rebecca's work had left no broken chains. William slid another document toward Kenneth. "The trial date is confirmed. 3 weeks away." Kenneth stared quietly at the calendar. He had imagined this day for months. Instead of feeling anxious, he felt strangely calm. The waiting had been harder than the trial itself would probably be. "You'll testify," William said. "I expected that. But probably not for very long." Kenneth frowned. "I thought I was the main witness." William shook his head. "No." He pointed towards the binders. "These are." The statement stayed with Kenneth long after he drove home. Most people imagined courtroom victories coming from emotional speeches. William believed something entirely different. Documents, dates, verification. Those things couldn't become nervous under cross-examination. The following Monday, Kenneth's ordinary life continued exactly as before. He repaired a cracked steam pipe beneath the auditorium. He replaced 2 emergency exit signs. He unclogged a science classroom sink where someone had poured plaster down the drain. Teachers thanked him. Students barely noticed him. That suited Kenneth perfectly. At lunch, Principal Linda Brooks stopped by the maintenance office carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You've seemed distracted lately." Kenneth smiled politely. "I've had a few things going on." She didn't ask about the divorce. Everyone at school already knew. Instead, she looked around the workshop. "I've been meaning to tell you something." "What is it?" "The district approved next year's maintenance budget." Kenneth waited. "They increased it." "That's good. They also approved your proposal." Kenneth looked surprised. "The vocational workshop?" Linda nodded. "You've been asking for years." Kenneth had nearly forgotten. Long before the divorce, he had proposed converting an abandoned storage building behind the school into a practical workshop where students could learn woodworking, plumbing basics, electrical safety, and small engine repair. Budget cuts had always delayed the project. Until now. Linda smiled. "Construction starts next summer." Kenneth looked through the workshop window toward the old brick storage building standing beyond the football field. For the first time in months, he thought about something other than court. Something worth building. That evening, Tyler visited the apartment after baseball practice. The college acceptance letter from Ohio State still sat proudly on the refrigerator. Tyler noticed the construction sketches spread across the kitchen table. "What's all this?" Kenneth explained the workshop idea. Tyler studied the drawings. "This is actually pretty cool." "I hope so. They'll let students build things. That's the idea." Tyler smiled. "I would have loved this when I was 12. Kenneth laughed quietly. "You still can." Father and son spent the evening discussing workbenches, tool storage safety equipment, and possible layouts. For nearly 3 hours, the divorce disappeared from both their minds. As Tyler prepared to leave, he hesitated beside the apartment door. "Dad." "Yeah." "Can I ask you something?" "Always." Tyler shifted awkwardly. "People keep saying Mom's going to win." Kenneth remained silent. "I don't really understand what that means." Kenneth considered his answer carefully. "Sometimes people think court is about winning." "Isn't it? No?" "What is it?" Kenneth looked directly at his son. "It's about finding out what can actually be proven." Tyler nodded slowly. "So," he searched for the right words, "you're not trying to beat Mom." Kenneth answered immediately. "No? I'm trying to tell the truth correctly." Tyler seemed relieved by that answer. Kenneth hoped he remembered it. 2 days later, the formal witness lists were exchanged. Scarlett's attorneys planned to call 6 witnesses, 2 corporate colleagues, 1 financial advisor, a neighbor, a leadership consultant, Scarlett herself. William's list looked surprisingly short. Kenneth, Rebecca Collins, only 2 witnesses. Kenneth stared at the filing. "That's it," William smiled. "We're not trying to impress anyone. We're trying to prove something." Rebecca organized another stack of exhibits. "The fewer witnesses you need, the stronger your documents usually are." Preparation intensified. William conducted practice testimony inside the conference room. He never told Kenneth what to say. Instead, he taught him what not to do. "Don't guess. If you don't remember, say so. Never argue. Answer only the question asked. Don't volunteer extra information. Don't assume the attorney is trying to help you." Kenneth appreciated every instruction. Machines behaved predictably. Courtrooms didn't. The week before trial, another unexpected development occurred. Scarlett's attorneys filed several motions attempting to exclude portions of Rebecca's financial analysis. William expected it. "They're attacking the expert." Rebecca shrugged. "They're supposed to." She spent 2 days revising reports, expanding citations, and documenting every calculation. Kenneth watched her work. Nothing emotional, nothing defensive, only precision. Every challenged figure received another source. Every questioned calculation gained another explanation. William finally looked satisfied. "Now if they challenge it again," Rebecca finished his sentence. "They'll have to challenge the underlying bank records." William smiled. "And that's difficult." The hearing on the evidentiary motions lasted less than an hour. Judge Eleanor Whitmore reviewed both arguments carefully. She asked Rebecca several technical questions. Rebecca answered each one calmly, without notes, without hesitation. When the hearing ended, most of her analysis remained admissible. Outside the courthouse, William allowed himself the smallest smile Kenneth had ever seen. "Good day," Kenneth agreed. Not because they had defeated anyone, because the facts would now be heard. 3 evenings before trial, Kenneth returned to the apartment after work to find another envelope beneath his door. No law firm, no court stamp, only his name handwritten across the front. Inside was a single folded page. No signature, no greeting. Just one sentence. "You're making a mistake. Walk away before this goes too far." Kenneth read it twice, then placed it inside a clear evidence sleeve without touching anything else. He called William immediately. "Don't throw it away," William said. I wasn't planning to. Good. Should I be worried? William paused. No. Why not? Because anonymous letters usually appear when someone wants emotion to replace procedure. Kenneth slipped the letter into the fireproof box beside every other document. Another fact. Nothing more. The next morning he arrived at school before sunrise. The boiler room smelled faintly of machine oil and warm metal. He completed his inspection rounds exactly as always. By 8 o'clock, students filled the hallways. Teachers greeted him. Someone thanked him for fixing the auditorium lights. Ordinary life continued. That afternoon, William called. The judge issued one final pretrial order. What changed? Nothing important. Kenneth waited. William's voice became quieter. Except one thing. What? The court has ordered both parties to personally attend the entire trial. Kenneth understood immediately. No leaving after testimony. No avoiding uncomfortable evidence. Everyone would remain inside the courtroom until proceedings concluded, including Scarlett, including himself. Late that evening, Rebecca sent William her final accounting report. 312 pages, every exhibit indexed, every source verified, every calculation independently reproducible. William forwarded Kenneth only the title page, nothing else. At the bottom he added one short message. Tomorrow we stop preparing. Tomorrow we begin proving. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in November. Kenneth parked his 12-year-old pickup in the public lot across from the Franklin County Courthouse just after 7:30. The city had not fully awakened. Streetlights still reflected across damp pavement from the night's light rain. He sat inside the truck for a moment with both hands resting on the steering wheel. Not praying, not rehearsing, simply breathing. He had spent nearly 4 years preparing for this week. Nothing useful would come from rushing the final steps. When he entered the courthouse, William Carter was already waiting beside the security checkpoint. He carried only one leather briefcase. Rebecca Collins followed several minutes later with a rolling case containing 3 carefully labeled binders. No one spoke much. There was nothing left to prepare. Only procedure remained. Courtroom 4B looked almost exactly as Kenneth remembered from the temporary hearings. Dark wooden benches, the state seal mounted above the bench, 2 counsel tables, a witness stand positioned slightly to the left. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered precisely at 9 o'clock. Everyone stood. She reviewed several procedural matters before looking toward both attorneys. We are here regarding the dissolution of the marriage between Kenneth Lee and Scarlett Lee. Her voice remained calm. This court expects professionalism from every person present. Both attorneys acknowledged the instruction. The first morning focused almost entirely on opening statements. Scarlett's attorney rose first. He walked confidently before the jury box that no longer existed because family court relied entirely on judicial findings. His voice carried easily through the courtroom. This case is about unequal effort. He described Scarlett as an accomplished executive who had spent years supporting a husband unwilling to pursue greater opportunities. He emphasized salary comparisons, career advancement, professional achievements. He described Kenneth as comfortable, remaining ordinary, while Scarlett carried increasing financial responsibility. Kenneth listened without moving. William had warned him. Opening statements were arguments, not evidence, the attorney continued. My client entered this marriage believing in partnership. Instead, she became responsible for almost every meaningful financial success achieved by this family. Several spectators nodded subtly. Kenneth noticed. He expected it. People naturally believed confident stories when they hadn't yet seen documents. Scarlett's attorney concluded by promising the court that the evidence would demonstrate Kenneth contributed little beyond routine household maintenance. Routine household maintenance. Kenneth almost smiled. He wondered how many people inside the room had ever replaced a commercial boiler during winter break, so 800 students could return to warm classrooms, or rebuilt an entire roof without hiring contractors because the mortgage payment mattered more than convenience. But those thoughts stayed inside his own mind. William stood only after the courtroom became completely quiet. He remained beside the counsel table instead of walking dramatically across the room. His opening statement lasted less than 10 minutes. This case is not about appearances. It is not about job titles. It is not about whose business card sounds more impressive. He paused. It is about accuracy. William held up one thin folder. Over the coming days, this court will review financial records, bank statements, discovery responses, verified accounting analyses, public corporate filings. They will either agree with one another, or they won't. He looked briefly toward Judge Whitmore. My client asks for nothing more than a decision based upon verified facts. Then he sat down. Kenneth appreciated the simplicity. No emotional language, no attacks, just evidence. The first witness was Scarlett. She walked confidently to the witness stand wearing a tailored navy suit and a pearl necklace Kenneth remembered giving her on their 15th anniversary. For a brief moment, he forgot entirely about the trial. He remembered the evening he had hidden the jewelry box beneath the driver's seat of his pickup because he couldn't afford elegant wrapping paper. She had cried when opening it. Now those same pearls rested above testimony describing him as someone who had failed to grow with her. Scarlett answered questions smoothly. She described years of increasing professional responsibility, corporate travel, leadership positions, financial pressure. She acknowledged that Kenneth had been dependable around the house. Then came the phrase Kenneth expected. But dependability isn't the same as ambition. Her attorney nodded. What do you mean? Scarlett folded her hands. I continued building our future. He stopped trying. Kenneth kept his eyes on the witness stand. He noticed she never looked toward him. Instead, she addressed every answer directly to the judge. She described Kenneth as satisfied with remaining a maintenance supervisor despite opportunities to pursue engineering. She explained that she had become the family's primary financial provider. She listed salary figures, bonuses, retirement contributions. Everything sounded organized, reasonable, persuasive. Then came questions about the marriage itself. Scarlett described emotional distance, different priorities, growing incompatibility. Most of those statements contained enough truth to sound believable. Kenneth knew marriages rarely ended because only one person changed. He didn't resent her for saying so, but she omitted every sacrifice that had allowed her career to develop in the first place. She omitted the engineering acceptance letter folded into a kitchen drawer 20 years earlier. She omitted weekends spent repairing houses instead of paying contractors. She omitted evenings Kenneth stayed home so she could attend networking dinners. She omitted hundreds of ordinary decisions that never appeared on financial statements. William began cross-examination. His style surprised several observers. He asked almost nothing about emotion, nothing about arguments, nothing about marriage counseling. Instead, he opened a binder. Mrs. Lee. Yes. You testified that your husband lacked ambition. I did. William nodded. You also testified that you became the family's primary financial provider. Yes. No disagreement there. Scarlett appeared slightly surprised. William continued. Let's discuss timelines. He projected a simple chart onto the courtroom monitor. One column listed Kenneth's employment history. The second listed Scarlett's promotions. No commentary, only dates. When did your husband begin working full-time for Columbus Central Public High School? Scarlett answered. About 20 years ago. And when did you complete graduate school? A year later. William nodded. Who was working full-time while you attended classes? Scarlett hesitated briefly. Kenneth? Who paid the mortgage during those years? Both of us. William looked at one exhibit. According to tax records, he paused, your husband earned approximately 73% of household income during your graduate program. Scarlett looked toward her attorney. I'd have to see those documents. You will. William smiled politely. No further questions on that point. He moved immediately to another topic. Again, only dates, only verified records, no accusations, no raised voices. Judge Whitmore took notes continuously. Kenneth watched the judge more than Scarlett. She rarely reacted visibly, but she asked William to leave several exhibits on the bench after questioning concluded. That detail mattered. The afternoon continued with testimony from one of Scarlett's corporate colleagues. He described her leadership skills, her dedication, her demanding work schedule. William asked only one question during cross-examination. Were you present inside the Lee household when these marital decisions occurred? No. Thank you. Nothing more. The witness stepped down. Another executive followed. Similar testimony. Similar cross-examination. Again, William asked almost nothing. By the afternoon recess, several people sitting behind Kenneth whispered quietly. One man leaned toward another. I thought the husband's lawyer would fight harder. Kenneth heard them. He understood why. William looked passive. Too passive. Almost uninterested. Rebecca leaned toward Kenneth during recess. They think we're losing. Kenneth smiled faintly. Are we? Rebecca closed her notebook. No. They're presenting opinions. We're waiting to present records. The distinction mattered. Opinions required witnesses. Records required patience. Court resumed. One final witness testified before adjournment. A leadership consultant hired by Scarlett's company described executive stress and career demands. Interesting testimony. Entirely unrelated to financial disclosures. William asked only whether he had ever reviewed the Lee family's financial records. No. No further questions. As everyone gathered their files for the day, Kenneth noticed something unusual. Judge Whitmore remained seated. Instead of immediately leaving the bench, she quietly reviewed several exhibits William had introduced during Scarlett's testimony, especially the employment timeline, especially the tax returns, especially one highlighted financial summary Rebecca had prepared. She spent nearly 5 additional minutes reading before finally standing. Court adjourned until the following morning. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited near the sidewalk. Neither legal team stopped. William led Kenneth directly toward the parking garage. Only after reaching the truck did Kenneth finally speak. I feel like we hardly did anything today. William placed his briefcase into the back seat. We did exactly what we intended. Kenneth looked confused. We let them commit completely to their story. William closed the truck door gently. And tomorrow? He glanced back towards the courthouse. We begin comparing that story to the documents. The second day of trial began with silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The deliberate kind that settled over a courtroom when everyone understood the direction of a case was about to change. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered exactly at 9. William Carter stood before she finished organizing her notes. The respondent calls Rebecca Collins. Rebecca walked calmly to the witness stand carrying only a slim binder. She wore a plain gray suit. No jewelry except a simple watch. Nothing about her appearance demanded attention. Her work would do that. After taking the oath, William established her credentials. Certified forensic accountant, 22 years of experience, more than 400 financial investigations, expert testimony in both state and federal courts. Scarlett's attorney objected only twice. Judge Whitmore overruled both objections. Rebecca became the court's financial expert. William walked toward the evidence monitor. Miss Collins, did you review the financial records produced during discovery? I did. Were those records sufficient to perform a complete accounting analysis? They were. Did you use standard forensic accounting methods? Yes. Can you explain your process? Rebecca never looked toward Scarlett. She spoke only to the judge. I reconstructed the movement of funds using original bank records, tax filings, payroll records, corporate reimbursements, brokerage statements, and verified public filings. No assumptions? No. Speculation? No. Only documented transactions. Correct. William displayed the first timeline. Months stretched across the screen. Colored lines connected dozens of financial transfers. To someone unfamiliar with accounting, it looked complicated. Rebecca made it simple. This blue line represents salary deposited into disclosed marital accounts. She pointed again. The green line represents transfers into investment accounts listed during discovery. Another line appeared. The red line represents transfers into accounts omitted from the original financial disclosures. The courtroom became noticeably quieter. William asked only one question. How many omitted accounts did you identify? 2 primary brokerage accounts. Were those accounts active? Yes. During the marriage? Yes. Judge Whitmore leaned forward slightly. Rebecca continued. The accounts collectively received more than $600,000 through documented transfers. No one reacted dramatically, but Kenneth noticed Scarlett's attorney writing much faster than before. William displayed another exhibit, corporate reimbursement records, hotel invoices, travel expenses. Miss Collins, did you compare these reimbursement requests with underlying financial records? I did. What did you find? Rebecca enlarged 2 invoices. They appear nearly identical. She highlighted invoice numbers. These invoice numbers are sequential. What does that indicate? They were generated during the same billing cycle. But the reimbursement claims place them months apart. William nodded. Is that consistent with normal business practice? No. Scarlett's attorney stood. Objection. Speculation. Rebecca answered before William could. I am not offering an opinion regarding intent. I am identifying inconsistencies in documented records. Judge Whitmore overruled the objection. Rebecca continued without changing her tone. Several reimbursement claims also failed to match verified airline travel records. Again, she avoided conclusions. Only facts, only comparisons. Kenneth watched the judge carefully. Every few minutes, Judge Whitmore underlined something in her notebook. William finally reached the exhibit Kenneth had been waiting to see, the corporate ownership filing. Miss Collins, did you obtain certified registration documents for Easton Financial Holdings? Yes. He handed the certified copy to the clerk. The clerk delivered it to the judge. Rebecca pointed toward the highlighted section. The amended ownership filing became effective 11 days before the divorce petition. William asked quietly, who appears as an authorized managing member. Daniel Mercer. And Scarlett Lee. Scarlett's attorney immediately objected. William remained still. Judge Whitmore reviewed the certified filing herself. After nearly 30 seconds, she looked up. The document is admitted, Rebecca continued. The existence of this ownership interest was not disclosed within the preliminary marital financial statements. William approached the witness stand. From a forensic accounting perspective, what significance does an omitted ownership interest have? Rebecca answered carefully. It affects the accuracy of marital asset disclosures. Could it influence property division? Yes. Substantially. It could. William sat down. His direct examination had lasted barely 45 minutes. The damage came not from emotion. It came from documentation. Scarlett's attorney approached for cross-examination. He smiled politely. Miss Collins, you were hired by Mr. Lee's legal team? I was. They're paying you? Yes. So you have an interest in helping your client? Rebecca answered without hesitation. My responsibility is to provide accurate accounting, regardless of who retains me. He nodded. You cannot testify regarding motive. Correct. You cannot testify why any transfer occurred. Correct. You cannot state anyone intentionally hid assets. Correct. Several spectators seemed encouraged. The attorney continued pressing. So all you really have are numbers? Rebecca smiled faintly for the first time. No. I have verified financial history. The attorney paused. Rebecca continued. Numbers become history when every transaction is independently documented. Silence settled again. He shifted topics. You cannot say these omitted accounts belonged exclusively to Mrs. Lee. Rebecca opened the certified filing. I can state she was an authorized managing member. According to public corporate records. He changed direction again. You don't know whether Mr. Lee knew about these accounts? No. I do not. You never interviewed Mrs. Lee? No. I was hired to analyze records, not conversations. The cross-examination lasted another hour. Rebecca never became defensive, never argued, never expanded beyond the question asked. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, Kenneth realized something. She hadn't defeated anyone. She had simply refused to move beyond what documents could prove. That discipline made her testimony difficult to attack. The afternoon session belonged to Kenneth. William called him to the stand. Walking toward the witness chair felt strangely familiar, almost peaceful. He raised his right hand, took the oath, sat down. William began with ordinary questions. Employment, education, marriage, Tyler. Nothing dramatic. Then he projected an old photograph onto the courtroom monitor. Kenneth recognized it immediately. A faded picture taken outside a small apartment nearly 21 years earlier. Scarlett stood smiling beside him. Both looked impossibly young. What is this? William asked. Our first apartment. When was this taken? The day Scarlett graduated. William nodded. Were you working then? Yes. Where? Columbus Central Public High School. What was Scarlett doing? Graduate school. William displayed tax returns from those years. Who earned most of the household income during that period? I did, Scarlett's attorney objected. Judge Whitmore allowed the question. Kenneth answered simply. I worked full-time. William moved carefully through the next several years. Mortgage payments, home repairs, childcare schedules. Kenneth never exaggerated. When he didn't remember exact dates, he said so. When documents refreshed his memory, he acknowledged them. William eventually reached the engineering acceptance letter. Mr. Lee, did you receive admission to Ohio State University's engineering program? Yes. Did you attend? No. Why not? Kenneth looked briefly towards the judge. Someone needed stable income while Scarlett finished school. No speech followed, no attempt to gain sympathy. Just one sentence. William allowed it to settle. Then he asked quietly, Did you regret that decision? Kenneth answered honestly. No. Several people behind him shifted slightly. William nodded. No further questions on that subject. The rest of Kenneth's testimony focused on documentation, receipt organization, household expenses, maintenance records, financial notebooks. William introduced box after box of carefully preserved documents. Every receipt matched a bank statement. Every notebook matched a calendar entry. Every repair matched photographs. Kenneth had unknowingly built his own credibility for years before the divorce ever began. Scarlett's attorney approached for cross-examination. Mr. Lee, do you consider yourself ambitious? Kenneth thought for several seconds. I consider myself dependable. That wasn't my question. I know, the attorney smiled. So your answer is no, Kenneth remained calm. My answer is that I chose stability over promotion. For whom? My family. The attorney paced slowly. You never became an engineer? No. You never started a business? No. You remained a maintenance supervisor? Yes. He looked toward the judge. No further questions. Kenneth stepped down. As he returned to counsel table, he noticed Judge Whitmore looking at one particular exhibit, the engineering acceptance letter. She read it again, then placed it beside the financial timeline Rebecca had introduced earlier. William leaned toward Kenneth and whispered quietly, Today wasn't about proving who earned more. Kenneth looked at him. What was it about? William closed his notebook. It was about proving the difference between appearance and contribution. Court adjourned for the evening. But before leaving the bench, Judge Whitmore addressed both attorneys. I have one instruction. The courtroom stopped moving. Tomorrow morning. She looked directly at both counsel tables. I want the original ownership documents for Easton Financial Holdings brought before this court. William answered first. We'll have them, Your Honor. Scarlett's attorney responded more slowly. So will we. Kenneth noticed something he had not seen since the divorce began. For the first time, Scarlett lowered her eyes before leaving the courtroom. The courtroom felt different on the third morning. Not louder, not more crowded, simply heavier. By then, everyone understood the divorce trial had evolved into something far more complicated than disagreements over property. Judge Eleanor Whitmore reviewed several documents before taking the bench. When she looked toward both attorneys, her first instruction was brief. I have reviewed yesterday's exhibits. She paused. Today I want complete clarity regarding ownership interests, financial disclosures, and the sequence in which relevant events occurred. William Carter stood. Yes, Your Honor. Scarlett's attorney nodded. So noted. William called no witness. Instead, he requested permission to present certified documentary exhibits through judicial notice and prior testimony. Judge Whitmore granted the request. Rebecca remained seated behind counsel table. Her work would now speak for itself. The courtroom monitor displayed a simple calendar. Nothing dramatic. Just dates. William approached slowly. Your Honor, I would like to examine chronology. He pointed to the first entry, March 4th. Mrs. Lee becomes an authorized managing member of Easton Financial Holdings. Another date appeared. March 9th. Transfers begin entering the newly identified brokerage accounts. Another. March 15th. Additional investment authority forms are executed. Then the final date. March 26th. Mrs. Lee files for divorce. William stepped aside. No opinions. No speculation. Only sequence. Judge Whitmore examined each document individually. Every date matched. Every certification carried official seals. Scarlett's attorney stood. The existence of ownership does not establish misconduct. William nodded immediately. I agree. The answer surprised nearly everyone. William continued. We have never argued otherwise. The attorney hesitated. William looked toward the judge. Our position has always been limited. The financial disclosures filed with this court did not include these ownership interests. Judge Whitmore looked toward Scarlett's counsel. Is that statement factually disputed? A long pause followed. Finally, he answered. The ownership interest existed. It was not included within the preliminary disclosures. Kenneth noticed several spectators exchange quiet glances. The first undisputed admission had arrived. William didn't react. He simply turned another page. The next exhibit showed the disclosure form signed under penalty of perjury. Judge Whitmore compared them carefully with the certified ownership documents. Then she looked toward Scarlett. Mrs. Lee, you personally reviewed these financial disclosures before filing. Scarlett answered quietly. Yes. And you signed them? Yes. The judge made another note. Nothing else. No lecture, no accusation. Only another fact entering the record. William rested. Scarlett's attorney immediately called Daniel Mercer. Kenneth had not seen him since months before the divorce began. Daniel entered confidently, mid-50s, expensive charcoal suit, perfect posture. He projected the calm authority expected from a senior corporate executive. After taking the oath, he explained Easton Financial Holdings. According to him, it served as a consulting entity designed to manage executive incentive compensation. Scarlett's attorney guided him carefully. Was the company legitimate? Yes. Was Mrs. Lee's ownership connected to executive compensation? Yes. Were any assets intentionally concealed? Absolutely not. Kenneth listened without expression. William didn't interrupt. Daniel continued describing stock incentives, deferred compensation consulting agreements, and investment planning. The explanation sounded technical, convincing, complicated enough that many people in the gallery appeared lost. That seemed intentional. When direct examination ended, Scarlett's attorney looked satisfied. William approached for cross-examination, carrying only one thin folder. Mr. Mercer. Good morning. You've served as an executive for nearly 18 years. Correct. You understand corporate documentation? I do. You understand disclosure requirements? Yes. William nodded. You testified that Easton Financial Holdings existed for executive compensation. Correct. He displayed the original corporate amendment. Would you read the effective date? Daniel complied. March 4th. William projected another exhibit, Scarlett's executive employment agreement. Would you read the date authorizing executive compensation participation? Daniel adjusted his glasses. April 18th. Silence settled over the courtroom. William spoke softly. So the ownership structure existed. Before eligibility for executive compensation? Daniel hesitated. It appears that way. William nodded once. No argument. He turned another page. Who prepared the ownership amendment? Our legal department. Who requested Scarlett Lee be added? Daniel paused. I don't specifically remember. William approached the witness stand. Would reviewing your deposition refresh your memory? It might. William handed him the transcript. Daniel read silently. His shoulders stiffened. Does your memory improve? Yes. What did you testify? Daniel answered reluctantly. I requested the amendment. William remained calm. Why? Scarlett's attorney objected. Attorney-client issues. Judge Whitmore sustained the objection. William accepted the ruling without protest. Instead, he changed direction. Mr. Mercer! When discovery requests were served in this matter, were you aware that Easton Financial Holdings existed? Yes. Were you aware Mrs. Lee held an ownership interest? Yes. Were you ever asked to preserve corporate records? Yes. And you did? Yes. No further questions. Kenneth understood exactly what William had accomplished. He never accused Daniel. He simply established knowledge. The afternoon continued with financial documents rather than witnesses. William projected transfer histories one page at a time. No dramatic music, no emotional speeches, just money moving through accounts. Judge Whitmore interrupted only once. Mr. Carter? Yes, Your Honor? Please explain Exhibit 147. William enlarged the page. This transfer originated from a disclosed marital account. He highlighted another entry. Within 48 hours, the funds entered one of the brokerage accounts omitted from preliminary disclosures. The judge compared both statements herself. The account numbers match. Yes. Scarlett's attorney stood. Those funds remained marital assets, regardless of location. William nodded. They may have. Our concern has never been location. He looked directly towards the bench. Our concern has been disclosure. Judge Whitmore underlined something again. Kenneth had noticed that habit throughout the trial. Whenever William emphasized precision instead of accusation, the judge wrote more. Late in the afternoon, Scarlett herself returned to the witness stand. This time the atmosphere felt entirely different, not hostile, focused. William approached slowly. Mrs. Lee, you reviewed the preliminary financial disclosure forms. Yes. You signed them. Yes. You understood they required complete disclosure. Yes. William displayed the certified ownership amendment. Were you an authorized managing member on March 4th? Yes. Did that ownership exist when the disclosures were signed? Yes. Were those ownership interests listed? Scarlett looked toward her attorney. He remained silent. Finally, she answered. No. William asked nothing for several seconds. The silence became almost uncomfortable. Then he spoke again. Why? Scarlett inhaled slowly. I believed the interests were contingent. William opened another binder. Your ownership agreement states otherwise. He handed the document to the clerk. The clerk delivered it to the witness. Scarlett read quietly. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. William asked gently, Does that document describe your interest as contingent? She remained silent for several moments. No. No further questions. Kenneth watched the exchange carefully. William had not embarrassed her. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't accused her of deception. He simply allowed her own signature to answer. Court recessed briefly before closing arguments were scheduled for the following morning. As people gathered their belongings, Judge Whitmore addressed both attorneys. I have one additional matter. Everyone stopped. She looked first toward Scarlett's counsel. Tomorrow morning, before closing arguments, I want both parties to address one remaining issue. She held up the preliminary disclosure forms. Specifically, whether these omissions were material to the equitable division of marital property. William nodded. We're prepared. Scarlett's attorney answered more cautiously. So are we. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered once again near the courthouse entrance. Neither legal team stopped. Kenneth and William walked toward the parking garage in silence. Halfway there, Kenneth finally asked, Did today go the way you expected? William unlocked his car. No? Kenneth looked surprised. It went better. Why? William rested one hand on the roof of the car. Because no one disputed the documents. He paused. They only disputed what the documents meant. Kenneth nodded slowly. And tomorrow? William looked back toward the courthouse one last time. Tomorrow, the judge decides whether those omissions changed the fairness of the entire divorce. He opened the driver's door. And after listening carefully for 3 days, I believe she's already asking herself one more question. What question? William's expression remained unreadable. If the disclosures were incomplete, what else deserves a second look before this marriage can legally end? The final day of testimony began with an unusual request from the bench. Before either attorney could stand, Judge Eleanor Whitmore looked toward the court clerk. Please bring me the original financial disclosure forms. The clerk handed her a thick file. The judge compared every signature with the certified ownership records already admitted into evidence. The courtroom remained completely silent. No one interrupted. No one whispered. The only sound came from the turning of paper. Several minutes passed before Judge Whitmore finally looked up. Counsel, William Carter stood. Yes, Your Honor. I asked yesterday whether the omissions were material. I've reviewed the submissions from both parties. She paused. I would now like closing arguments. Scarlett's attorney went first. He approached the center of the courtroom with measured confidence. Your Honor, This marriage failed because two people grew apart. No amount of accounting changes that reality. He acknowledged the omitted ownership interest. He acknowledged incomplete disclosure. But he argued those issues did not alter the fundamental purpose of the divorce. The assets remain identifiable. The accounts exist. The ownership interest has now been disclosed. He paced slowly. There has been no evidence that my client destroyed records. No evidence of hidden cash. No evidence of fraudulent corporations. He looked toward Kenneth. The respondent has attempted to transform an ordinary divorce into something much larger. He described Scarlett as an executive managing increasingly complicated compensation structures. He suggested confusion rather than deception, oversight rather than concealment, administrative complexity rather than bad faith. He finished by requesting equitable division based upon the corrected financial information. His argument lasted almost 40 minutes. It was polished, professional, reasonable. Kenneth understood why Scarlett had chosen him. William waited until complete silence returned. He carried no stack of papers, only one thin folder. He remained beside counsel table instead of walking dramatically before the bench. Your Honor, this court is not being asked to decide whether marriages fail. They do. It is not being asked whether careers evolve. They do. He opened the folder. The court is being asked something much smaller, and much more important. He lifted the preliminary disclosure statement. This document required complete financial disclosure. He held up the certified ownership filing. This document establishes an ownership interest. He placed both documents beside one another. The dates are undisputed. The signatures are undisputed. The omission is undisputed. William looked directly toward Judge Whitmore. My client never claimed wealth entitled him to more. He never claimed poverty entitled him to sympathy. He asked only for one thing: accuracy. He allowed the word to settle. For 3 days, this court has heard testimony about ambition, careers, job titles, professional success. William gently closed the folder. But paper does not care about reputation. Paper remembers dates. It remembers signatures. It remembers transfers. His voice never rose. Truth has an advantage. It does not need exaggeration. William returned to counsel table. No further argument. Kenneth realized the closing statement had lasted barely 12 minutes. Judge Whitmore thanked both attorneys. She reviewed her notes for nearly 10 minutes before speaking again. I am prepared to rule. The courtroom straightened, almost as one. Kenneth folded his hands quietly. Scarlett looked toward the bench for the first time since the proceedings had begun. Judge Whitmore spoke carefully. This court finds that the marriage has suffered an irretrievable breakdown. The petition for dissolution is granted. No one reacted. That part had never been in doubt. The judge continued. The court further finds that preliminary financial disclosures submitted by the petitioner were materially incomplete. Scarlett's attorney lowered his eyes. Judge Whitmore continued reading. Whether intentional or negligent, the omissions prevented accurate evaluation of the marital estate during the early stages of these proceedings. She turned another page. The court therefore rejects the proposed property division previously requested. Kenneth remained completely still. The court instead adopts the valuation supported by verified documentary evidence admitted during trial. One by one, she announced the division. The marital residence would be sold. Net proceeds divided according to the corrected assets schedule. The undisclosed investment interests would be included within the marital estate. All brokerage accounts would be valued using the date established by Rebecca Collins's forensic analysis. Retirement accounts would remain individually assigned according to statutory guidelines. Tyler's educational trust would remain untouched. Neither party objected. Judge Whitmore continued. The court also awards a portion of attorney fees incurred as a direct consequence of incomplete financial disclosures. William quietly wrote one note. Kenneth did not even look. Money no longer mattered as much as clarity. The judge closed one file. Kenneth assumed the hearing had ended. Instead, Judge Whitmore looked toward the clerk. There remains one administrative matter. She reached for another folder resting separately on the bench. This document was submitted yesterday afternoon. William looked toward the folder, but said nothing. Scarlett's attorney appeared briefly confused. Judge Whitmore addressed Kenneth directly. Mr. Lee. Kenneth stood. Yes, Your Honor. The court requires your signature before the final judgment can be entered. Scarlett looked sharply toward Kenneth. Her attorney frowned. Kenneth walked carefully toward the clerk. The folder looked ordinary. Plain, cream-colored paper. Court heading? Nothing unusual? The clerk opened it to the signature page. Judge Whitmore spoke calmly. This is an acknowledgment confirming receipt of the corrected financial schedule and final property allocation. Kenneth reached for the pen, then paused. Not because he intended to refuse, because William had taught him one lesson from the beginning. Read every document, every time. Judge Whitmore noticed. You may take whatever time you need. Kenneth nodded gratefully. He began reading from the first page instead of signing immediately. The courtroom waited. Several minutes passed. Most people expected nothing interesting. Then Kenneth reached the final section. His eyes stopped. He read the paragraph again. Once, then twice. He looked toward William. William gave no signal, no nod, no expression. Only complete neutrality. Kenneth continued reading. The final attachment referenced the corrected valuation schedule. Attached to it was the complete ownership structure of Easton Financial Holdings exactly as accepted into evidence. Every ownership percentage, every valuation, every effective date, every authorized signature. Everything now formed part of the official judgment. Once Kenneth signed, those findings would become incorporated into the court's final order. Scarlett suddenly stood. Your Honor. Her attorney immediately placed a hand on her arm, but she continued. I'd like a moment with my counsel. Judge Whitmore studied her carefully. For what purpose? Scarlett hesitated. I need to review the attachment. The judge glanced toward the document. You have possessed these records since discovery. Another silence. Scarlett slowly sat back down. Kenneth looked again at the signature line. He remembered the first settlement proposal months earlier. Sign quickly. Move on. Accept appearances. Today, everything felt different. The signature no longer represented surrender. It represented verification. He uncapped the pen, placed it gently above the signature line. And just before the ink touched the paper, Judge Whitmore spoke one final sentence that caused every person in the courtroom to freeze. Mr. Lee, before you sign, there is one final question this court needs answered. Every eye in the courtroom turned toward Judge Eleanor Whitmore. Kenneth remained standing beside the clerk's desk, the pen still suspended above the signature line. No one moved. No one spoke. The judge folded her hands. Mr. Lee, before this court enters its final judgment, I need clarification regarding one matter that has not been disputed by either party. Kenneth answered calmly. Yes, Your Honor. She looked down at her notes. Throughout these proceedings, substantial attention has been given to financial disclosures. She paused. But another issue continued appearing throughout the evidence. She lifted the engineering acceptance letter. This document. Kenneth recognized it immediately. The faded Ohio State University letter. The opportunity he had declined more than 2 decades earlier. Judge Whitmore continued. Both parties acknowledged its authenticity. Neither party disputed why it existed. She looked directly at Kenneth. I have one question. When you declined admission to the engineering program, did anyone require you to do so? Kenneth thought carefully before answering. No, Your Honor. No one forced me. So the decision was yours? Yes. The judge nodded. And why did you make it? The courtroom waited. Kenneth did not rush. He had learned long ago that truthful answers never required speed. My wife had 1 year left in graduate school. He spoke quietly. Our son had just been born. We couldn't afford for both of us to leave stable employment. So I stayed. Judge Whitmore continued. Did you expect compensation for that decision? No. Recognition? No. Did you ever present that decision as a leverage during your marriage? No. She closed the letter and placed it beside the final judgment. Thank you. Kenneth expected her to dismiss him. Instead, she looked toward Scarlett. Mrs. Lee. Scarlett stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. You heard your former husband testify. I did. Do you dispute his explanation? Scarlett hesitated. For the first time since the trial began, she answered without immediately looking toward her attorney. No. Judge Whitmore asked another question. Did Mr. Lee support your graduate education financially? Yes. Did he provide primary income during that period? Yes. Do you dispute those tax records? No. The courtroom became completely still again. Judge Whitmore nodded once. Thank you. Scarlett sat down. Kenneth noticed something unexpected. The confidence that had surrounded her during the first day of trial had disappeared. Not replaced by anger, by exhaustion. The judge turned several pages before speaking again. This court has observed something important. She addressed no one specifically. Professional achievement deserves respect. So does steady labor. She looked briefly toward Kenneth. The law does not assign greater dignity to executive offices than to maintenance workshops. Several spectators looked toward Kenneth. He lowered his eyes. Praise had always made him uncomfortable. Judge Whitmore continued. Contribution is measured by evidence, not appearances. She signed several pages of the judgment, then stopped once more. There remains the acknowledgement. She looked toward Kenneth. You may sign? Kenneth lowered the pen. He signed carefully, not hurriedly, not triumphantly, only carefully. The ink dried almost instantly. The clerk accepted the document. Judge Whitmore added her own signature beneath it. The final judgment became official. The marriage had legally ended. Yet before anyone could gather their belongings, Scarlett unexpectedly stood again. Your Honor, Judge Whitmore looked up. Yes. I'd like permission to address Mr. Lee. William immediately looked toward Kenneth. He offered no advice. The decision belonged entirely to the court. Judge Whitmore considered the request. This is unusual. Scarlett nodded. I understand. After a long pause, the judge answered. You may, but briefly. Scarlett turned. For the first time in months, she looked directly into Kenneth's eyes. The courtroom waited. So much of this case? She stopped, started again. So much of this marriage became about comparing careers. Kenneth listened silently. I kept believing titles proved value. Her voice remained controlled. I don't know when I started thinking that. No one interrupted. Scarlett looked briefly toward the engineering acceptance letter, still lying on the bench. I remembered the letter. I just stopped remembering what it cost. Kenneth said nothing. He wasn't waiting for an apology. He wasn't demanding one either. Scarlett inhaled slowly. I was wrong about one thing. Another pause. I called you unambitious. She looked around the courtroom. But staying when leaving would have been easier. Required more discipline than I admitted. The words hung in the air. They weren't dramatic. They weren't emotional. They were simply honest. Kenneth answered quietly. I never wanted you to lose. Scarlett looked surprised. I only wanted the truth. She nodded almost imperceptibly. I know. Judge Whitmore gently interrupted. Thank you. The exchange ended. No embrace. No reconciliation. Only understanding. Sometimes that was enough. Outside the courtroom, reporters rushed toward the courthouse entrance. Camera crews had arrived after hearing the trial involved undisclosed corporate assets. William quietly led Kenneth through a side hallway reserved for attorneys and court personnel. They exited into a narrow service alley behind the courthouse. Cold November air filled the silence. Kenneth finally exhaled. I didn't expect that. William smiled faintly. Neither did I. Rebecca joined them carrying the same gray rolling case that had accompanied her throughout the trial. It's over. Kenneth nodded. It feels strange. Rebecca laughed softly. Most people expect relief. What do people usually feel? She thought for a moment. Mostly quiet. Kenneth realized she was right. Victory wasn't loud. It didn't erase disappointment. It simply removed uncertainty. They walked together toward the parking garage. Halfway there, William stopped. I have something for you. He opened his briefcase. Inside rested the original engineering acceptance letter. Kenneth frowned. I thought it stayed with the court. I requested its return. William handed it over. You should keep it. Kenneth looked carefully at the faded paper. The edges had yellowed with age. The university seal remained visible. He smiled. I don't need it anymore. William raised an eyebrow. No. Kenneth folded the letter carefully. It already did its job? Rebecca looked curious. What job? Kenneth slipped the envelope into his coat pocket. It reminded everyone, including me, that sacrifice only matters when it's freely chosen. William nodded slowly. Fair enough. They reached the parking garage. Rebecca drove away first. William shook Kenneth's hand firmly. You'll hear from me when the attorney fee order is finalized. Kenneth smiled. I appreciate everything. William shook his head. You earned today. I just organized the paperwork. Kenneth climbed into his pickup. The same truck, the same worn steering wheel, the same cracked coffee stain beside the gear shift. Nothing looked different. Yet everything had changed. As he started the engine, his phone vibrated. One message. Tyler. How did it go? Kenneth looked through the windshield toward the courthouse one last time. He typed only 6 words. The truth finally had its day. Within seconds, Tyler replied. Dinner tonight, Kenneth smiled. Absolutely. He placed the phone beside him and drove slowly out of the parking garage. For the first time in years, he wasn't driving toward another legal meeting. He wasn't carrying another box of evidence. He wasn't preparing another response. The road ahead contained nothing except ordinary traffic. And somehow, that ordinary drive felt more valuable than every courtroom victory behind him. Winter settled quietly over Columbus. 3 weeks after the divorce, judgment became final. Snow covered the sidewalks outside Columbus Central Public High School before sunrise. Kenneth Lee arrived before 6, just as he had for nearly 22 years. Nothing about his routine suggested that he had recently won one of the most exhausting legal battles of his life. He unlocked the maintenance office, started the old coffee maker, reviewed the work orders left overnight. A leaking pipe near the science wing, a malfunctioning heater in the library, a broken exit sign inside the auditorium. The same ordinary responsibilities waited for him. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Most of the faculty knew the divorce had ended. Few knew the details. Kenneth had never discussed the courtroom. He answered questions politely, then changed the subject. By 8 o'clock, students filled the hallways. Principal Michael Harris stopped Kenneth outside the cafeteria. "You've got a minute?" "Of course." Michael closed the office door behind them. "I've been meaning to ask." Kenneth smiled. "If this is about the boiler, it's already fixed." Michael laughed. "It isn't." He sat behind his desk. "I heard the district engineering department is expanding." Kenneth remained silent. "They're creating a facilities operations director position." Michael slid a folder across the desk. "They asked if I'd recommend someone." Kenneth looked at the folder but didn't open it. "I appreciate that." "I'm not sure I want another job." Michael leaned back. "You know why I recommended you." Kenneth expected the obvious answer. Experience, reliability, longevity. Instead, Michael surprised him. "Because when something breaks around here, everyone sleeps better once they know you're handling it." Kenneth looked down quietly. "That's not engineering." "No," Michael smiled. "It's leadership." The words stayed with Kenneth for the rest of the morning. Not because they inflated his ego, because they reminded him of something Judge Whitmore had said. The law did not assign greater dignity to executive offices than to maintenance workshops. Neither, apparently, did people who worked beside him every day. That afternoon, Kenneth met Tyler for dinner at a small family restaurant on High Street. It wasn't expensive. It never had been. The owner knew them by name. The waitress remembered Tyler's favorite burger. Some traditions survived almost everything. Tyler waited until the meals arrived before speaking about the trial. "I watched every hearing transcript you sent." Kenneth smiled. "I figured." "You barely talked." "There wasn't much to say." Tyler shook his head. "I didn't understand that at first." Kenneth looked curious. "I kept waiting for you to expose everybody." "To embarrass Mom, to make some big speech." Kenneth quietly buttered a dinner roll, and I realized something. Tyler looked across the table. "You never wanted revenge?" Kenneth nodded. "No." "What did you want?" "The record corrected." Tyler smiled slowly. "I think that's harder." Kenneth laughed softly. "It definitely takes longer." For several minutes, they ate without speaking. Comfortable silence had always existed between them. Finally, Tyler reached into his backpack. "I've got something." He placed a framed photograph on the table. Kenneth recognized it immediately. An old family picture taken beside Lake Erie when Tyler was 9. Scarlett stood smiling. Kenneth held Tyler on his shoulders. The photograph had disappeared years earlier. "I found it while helping Mom pack." Kenneth looked surprised. "She gave it to you?" Tyler nodded. "She said you should have it." Kenneth studied the picture for several seconds. It captured a family before promotions, before resentment, before comparisons, before courtrooms. He didn't feel sadness, only gratitude that those years had genuinely existed. "I'll keep it." Tyler smiled. "I hoped you would." A week later, Kenneth received another unexpected call. William Carter. "The attorney fee order has been finalized. Everything complete." "Almost?" Kenneth frowned. "Almost?" William laughed. "I have a check for you." Kenneth immediately answered. "Donate it." William became quiet. "To what?" "The Vocational Scholarship Fund at Columbus Central." William waited. "Are you sure?" Kenneth looked through his living room window toward the neighborhood where he had spent nearly his entire adult life. "Someone helped me once. I'd like to help someone else." William smiled through the phone. "I'll make sure it happens." "One more thing." Kenneth listened. "I've practiced family law for 27 years. I've never seen anyone prepare the way you did." Kenneth answered honestly. I wasn't preparing to win. I was preparing to tell the truth. After hanging up, Kenneth returned to replacing a loose cabinet hinge inside his kitchen. Life continued, one repair at a time. Another month passed, then another. Spring arrived. The maple tree in the front yard slowly filled with new leaves. One Saturday morning, Kenneth received an envelope with no return address. Inside lay a handwritten note, no signature, just one page. Thank you for never trying to destroy me when you had the chance. I understand now that silence is not weakness. I hope someday I earn the same discipline. Kenneth recognized Scarlett's handwriting immediately. He read the note once, folded it carefully, placed it inside the same drawer that held the old engineering acceptance letter. Some things deserved preservation. Not because they reopened old wounds, because they reminded people how much they had learned. Late that spring, the Columbus School District announced its new facilities operations director. Kenneth accepted the position after several weeks of consideration. The promotion came with a larger office, a better salary, a district vehicle, more responsibility. When coworkers congratulated him, most assumed he had finally decided to become more ambitious. Kenneth smiled every time he heard the word. They misunderstood. He had not changed because someone once called him worthless. He had changed because he no longer needed to prove anything. Confidence left room for growth. Pride usually did not. On his first morning in the new position, he walked through the district warehouse before sunrise. Hundreds of tools lined the walls, maintenance schedules filled whiteboards, teams prepared for another ordinary workday. Kenneth gathered the supervisors for a short meeting. No speeches, no management slogans, only one instruction. If something goes wrong, fix the problem before worrying about who gets credit. Several supervisors nodded. One older electrician smiled. I think we'll get along just fine. Kenneth smiled back. So do I. As everyone dispersed, he stepped into his new office. The room overlooked the eastern side of the city. Morning sunlight reflected across rooftops. School buses moved steadily through neighborhoods. Children walked toward classrooms. Teachers unlocked doors. Custodians swept hallways. Thousands of ordinary people doing ordinary work. Most of them would never appear in newspapers. Few would receive public recognition. Yet every one of them quietly held entire communities together. Kenneth understood that now more clearly than ever. Real worth had never depended on being noticed. It depended on remaining dependable long after applause disappeared. He placed the framed Lake Erie photograph on the bookshelf behind his desk. Beside it, he placed the engineering acceptance letter, not as reminders of opportunities lost, but as reminders that every decision carried a cost, and that character was often revealed not by the opportunities people accepted, but by the sacrifices they chose without expecting anyone to notice. 5 years later, almost no one in Columbus remembered the divorce trial. New court cases had replaced old headlines. New scandals occupied local news. The public had moved on. Kenneth Lee was grateful for that. Real peace rarely arrived with applause. It arrived quietly after everyone else stopped paying attention. On an early autumn morning, Kenneth parked the district maintenance vehicle outside Columbus Central Public High School. Although his office now managed facilities across the entire school district, he still visited the campus where he had spent most of his career at least once every week. Not because anyone required him to, because it still felt like home. He walked through the familiar hallways before students arrived. Fresh paint covered the walls. The science classrooms had been renovated. New energy-efficient heating systems quietly replaced the aging equipment he had repaired countless times with his own hands. Some younger employees greeted him simply as Director Lee. Many had no idea he had once carried every toolbox himself. Kenneth preferred it that way. Titles described responsibility. They never defined identity. As he entered the old maintenance office, he found a young technician studying a blueprint with obvious frustration. The employee immediately stood. "Morning, Mr. Lee." "Morning." I've been trying to solve this ventilation issue for an hour. Kenneth placed his coffee on the table. Show me. The technician explained airflow calculations, equipment specifications, and budget concerns. Kenneth listened without interrupting. When the explanation ended, he walked to the mechanical diagram and quietly picked up a pencil. He drew one short line, moved one air return vent, changed one duct angle, then handed the pencil back. Run the numbers again. The technician entered the revised measurements into his laptop. His eyes widened. It works. Kenneth smiled. It usually helps to solve the problem instead of fighting it. The young man laughed. I've heard stories about you. Kenneth raised an eyebrow. Hopefully the good ones. They say you've never lost your temper on a job site. Kenneth considered the statement. That's not true. The technician looked surprised. I've lost my temper plenty of times. I just learned not to let it make decisions. The young man nodded thoughtfully. Lessons like that never appeared in engineering textbooks. Later that afternoon, Kenneth attended the dedication ceremony for a newly completed vocational education building. The district had named its annual Skilled Trades Scholarship after an anonymous donor. Very few people knew the donor had been Kenneth. He had insisted his name remain off the building. Principal Michael Harris still respected that request. During his speech, Michael addressed dozens of students, parents, and teachers gathered inside the new workshop. Success has many uniforms. Some wear business suits. Some wear hospital scrubs. Some wear work boots. He smiled toward the students. Never let anyone convince you that dignity belongs to only one profession. Kenneth remained quietly in the back row. No one noticed, exactly where he felt most comfortable. After the ceremony, Tyler found him near the parking lot. Time had changed both men. Tyler had become a civil engineer, not because Kenneth had expected him to, because it was the path Tyler genuinely loved. Dad, Kenneth smiled. You made it. I wouldn't have missed this. Tyler looked toward the vocational building. You know, I finally understand something. Kenneth waited. When I was younger, I thought your biggest sacrifice was giving up engineering school. Kenneth leaned against the truck. And now, I think your biggest sacrifice was never reminding anyone that you did. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The afternoon breeze carried fallen leaves across the parking lot. Kenneth finally answered. If a sacrifice has to be mentioned every day, it slowly becomes a transaction. Tyler smiled. I've been thinking about that. I try to remember it at work. Kenneth placed one hand on his son's shoulder. That's enough. Several days later, Kenneth received another unexpected envelope. This one contained an invitation, Scarlett Bennett. She had remarried 2 years after the divorce. The invitation announced the opening of a non-profit financial literacy program for young professionals. Inside the envelope rested a handwritten note. Kenneth. The courtroom ended one chapter. It did not have to define the rest of our lives. Your honesty forced me to become more honest with myself. Thank you for that. I hope this organization helps people avoid the mistakes I made. I wish you peace. Scarlett. Kenneth folded the note carefully. There was no bitterness left. No lingering desire to revisit old arguments. People sometimes imagined forgiveness as forgetting. He had learned something different. Forgiveness simply meant the past no longer controlled the future. A week later, Kenneth attended the opening quietly. He stayed near the back of the room. Scarlett noticed him after the speeches ended. She walked over with a calm smile. Thank you for coming. I wanted to see what you'd built. She nodded. It's different from the life I used to chase. Kenneth looked around the community center. Young couples sat at tables learning about budgeting, debt management, and financial planning. Volunteer accountants answered questions. Local attorneys offered free consultations. No cameras, No reporters, just people trying to make wiser decisions. It looks worthwhile, Scarlett smiled. I hope so. After a brief silence, she asked, Are you happy? Kenneth looked through the windows toward children playing outside. Yes. She nodded slowly. I'm glad. No dramatic reconciliation followed. None was needed. Some relationships ended best when they transformed into mutual respect from a distance. As Kenneth walked toward the exit, he passed a bulletin board displaying the organization's mission statement. One sentence caught his attention. Truth builds stronger futures than appearances. He smiled. Perhaps life had a quiet sense of humor after all. That evening, Kenneth returned home before sunset. He placed the day's mail on the kitchen counter, watered the small garden behind the house, fed the neighbor's cat while they were away. Simple routines, ordinary moments. The kind of life many people overlooked while chasing something louder. Inside his study stood 2 framed items, the engineering acceptance letter and the final court judgment. Visitors occasionally asked why he kept them together. Kenneth always gave the same answer. One reminds me of the opportunity I gave away. The other reminds me that integrity eventually returned something more valuable. Neither document represented victory. One represented sacrifice. The other represented truth. Together they told the complete story. As darkness settled outside, Kenneth turned off the lights downstairs and paused beside the living room window. Years earlier, someone had called him worthless inside a courtroom. For a brief moment, those words had echoed louder than his own quiet confidence. But words spoken in anger had never possessed the power that facts carried patiently over time. People could misunderstand silence. They could underestimate humility. They could confuse modest work with small value. The truth remained unchanged. Character revealed itself in ordinary choices repeated over many years. Justice had not arrived because Kenneth shouted the loudest. It arrived because he stayed calm long enough for evidence to speak. He closed the curtains, switched off the final light, and walked upstairs. Tomorrow would bring another ordinary workday. Another leaking pipe. Another maintenance report. Another young employee needing guidance, and Kenneth welcomed every bit of it, because he finally understood something that no courtroom could award, and no insult could ever take away. A person's true worth is never determined by the loudest voice in the room. It is revealed quietly, consistently, and unmistakably by the life they choose to build when no one is watching. Every life will eventually place us in a room where someone else decides our worth. Sometimes it's a courtroom. Sometimes it's an office, a family gathering, or even our own home. In those moments, the greatest temptation is to defend ourselves with louder words, sharper anger, or instant revenge. But Kenneth's story reminds us that true strength often looks surprisingly quiet. Character is built long before it is tested. Every honest choice, every sacrifice made without applause, every promise kept when no one is watching becomes part of the evidence that defines who we really are. Time has a remarkable way of exposing appearances and revealing truth. Titles may impress people for a season. Wealth may attract attention, and harsh words may leave temporary scars. But integrity has a much longer memory. When patience walks beside truth, justice eventually has something solid to stand on. Perhaps that's the lesson worth carrying into our own lives. We cannot control what others choose to believe about us, but we can control the kind of person we become every single day. Don't waste your energy trying to win every argument. Invest it in building a life that quietly speaks for itself. The people who truly matter will eventually recognize consistency, honesty, and resilience because those qualities never go out of style. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated, falsely judged, or had to let the truth speak for itself instead of defending yourself? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might encourage someone who needs hope today. And if you enjoy meaningful stories about resilience, justice, and quiet strength, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Tomorrow's story may remind you once again that the strongest people are often the ones the world notices last.